Byolha, the brown-haired woman, stares in absolute shock while clutching her cold drink. Her friend's sudden announcement causes Byolha to jump to her feet in disbelief. Well, that is one way to ruin a coffee date. Transitioning to a forced cheerfulness, she laughs and congratulates the black-haired woman on her upcoming wedding. The black-haired woman beams with joy, cordially inviting her friend to witness her happy union. Bayai holds the elegant wedding invitation, looking on with a polite, supportive smile. A startling coincidence arises as Byolha realizes the groom shares her own husband's name, causing her friend to laugh. Resting her head, the black-haired woman ominously suggests that the shared name is far from a mere coincidence. The world shatters as Byolha looks at a wedding photo, revealing her own husband is the groom. In an oppressive darkness, she processes the betrayal of a 6-year relationship, ending in another woman's marriage. The black-haired woman cruelly claims her pregnancy is by Byolha's husband, sparking a violent, furniture-toppling confrontation. Byolha demands a divorce from Do-yeon, but the black-haired man responds with cold, heartless mockery. Sobbing and broken, she is urged to regain her composure amidst the wreckage of her life. The black-haired woman mockingly reveals that Byolha is legally the mistress, as her own marriage was never registered. A devastating realization sinks in as she hears that Do-yeon never truly loved her from the beginning. Forced out of her own home, Byolha stands dejected while her betrayer demands she disappear forever. Left in tears, she watches the black-haired woman walk away with the life that was never hers. Time passes in a lonely blur as Byolha quits her job and isolates herself from everyone she knows. Clad in a hoodie and cap, she lives a shadow of her former life, avoiding the world. Slumping against a wall in her dim apartment, she reflects on 3 years spent running from her trauma. To escape her reality, she finds solace in a tragic novel titled The Countess of Elgrin. She becomes absorbed in the story of Roz, a noblewoman who silently endures her husband's constant infidelities. Through the pages, she seeks to drown out the painful memories of her own foolish past. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick crash as a terrifying "ah" escapes her during the disaster. Desperate pleas for help echo through the dust and falling stone as the structure disintegrates. Trapped and terrified, she watches as a massive slab of concrete falls toward her. As blood splatters across the wreckage, she laments that this tragic end was not what she wanted. The scene shifts abruptly to a grand, sunlit mansion belonging to a different era. A doctor bows to a man in noble attire, explaining that a sudden shock worsened the lady's condition. Reassured that her health is stable, the doctor flinches as a sudden bang sounds from the room. The panicked physician scampers away from the ornate doors following the sudden outburst. Inside, the pink-haired woman stares blankly as the doctor lets out an annoyed ugh, grumbling about quitting. He tentatively asks Lady Wen's if she is all right, unaware of the soul now inhabiting her body. Staring at her hands in shock, the pink-haired woman realizes she has been reborn as the novel's protagonist. The doctor gently advises her to rest, noting that her body remains in a fragile state. She recalls the history of Roswens, the tragic daughter of a fallen family, surrounded by white roses. Her memories reveal Rose's mistake of turning her back on her family for a mortal enemy named Eric. Frantic and confused, the pink-haired woman screams that this must be a dream, startling the nearby doctor. Burying her face in the pillows, she wishes she had simply died instead of entering this tragic world. Her despair deepens as she contemplates the cruel fate of living through another tragedy. The black-haired man, Eric, looms over her in bed, mockingly asking if she has finally come to. Gasping in horror, Roz recoils as he coldly mentions she collapsed from a recent miscarriage. Eric's apathy is chilling as he stands shirtless, while Roz reels from the traumatic news of her loss. A sharp pain pierces her heart as the word miscarriage echoes through her mind in the dark. She recalls the novel's plot where Eric's blatant infidelity led to Roz's immense suffering and heartbreak. Eric reaches for her, callously demanding they continue their duties despite her recent physical and emotional trauma. Revolted by his behavior, Roz pushes him away and demands he leave her bed immediately. Enraged by her defiance, Eric violently grabs her by the throat, asserting his dominance over her. He tightens his grip and reminds her of her previous desperation to bear his child first. With a cruel shove, he tosses her back onto the bed, leaving her letting out a pained ah. He coldly commands her to stay out of his affairs before leaving her to cough alone. The black-haired man leans in close, mockingly advising the pink-haired woman to remember today's events despite her supposed idiocy. A sudden, loud bang echoes as he leaves, while the pink-haired woman clutches her throat in visible physical distress. Collapsing onto her bed, she screams in frustration at the prospect of living with such a piece of trash. Gazing at the grand mansion, she wonders how she will manage to survive within this oppressive, high-stakes environment. Roz looks out her window, desperately wishing for just one ally to help her navigate this treacherous new life. Outside, two maids forcibly restrain a struggling blonde-haired maid who demands to be let go during their heated argument. Roz watches as a maid apologizes for the disturbance, claiming the blonde maid, Dawana, has been acting mentally unstable. Fuming with internal rage, the blonde maid wishes she could use a phone to record and sue her tormentors. Dawana is brought before Roz, looking around the room with a mix of cautious suspicion and defiant curiosity. Roz greets the newcomer with a serene, welcoming smile, appearing every bit the graceful noblewoman despite her internal turmoil. A sudden shh silences the room as both women realize they share a shocking connection to the modern world. Roz whispers about her confusion since waking up, while the blonde woman gasps, recognizing a specific tragic incident. The blonde woman extends a hand in friendship, glad to have found a fellow survivor in this alien world. Roz smiles politely, reflecting on the possibility that this encounter might actually be a lucky connection for her. The two women appear to grow close, standing together in a moment of shared solidarity within the mansion's gardens. The blonde woman reveals her true name is Lee Gyoru, a name intended to ensure she never loses. Gyoru encourages Roz to get along, emphasizing the rarity of her name as they sit together for tea. A wave of horror washes over Roz as she recognizes the face of the friend who stole her husband. The realization sinks in that her longtime friend and betrayer has followed her into this new life as well. Masking her shock, Rose politely compliments Gyorus's name while secretly planning her next move against her old enemy. Still skeptical, Roz asks Gyoru about her age to confirm if her suspicions about the woman's identity are correct. Gyoru cries as she reveals she is 29, lamenting the unfair loss of her husband and her past life. Roz's expression turns chillingly dark as she confirms that this is indeed the woman she never wished to see again. Sensing the tension, Gyoru turns the question back on Roz, asking for her name and if they are peers. Roz provides the name Kim Hana, a new identity that Gyoru doesn't recognize from their shared past in Korea. A sharp clink sounds as Roz sets her cup down, reflecting on the name she was forced to abandon. Sipping her tea, Roz laments that the gods have cruelly brought a past life grudge into this new world too. Gyoru's thoughts turn malicious, recalling how she found the previous version of her friend pathetic and weak during their betrayal. Unaware of the danger, Gyoru asks for details about the novel's plot, admitting she knows absolutely nothing about it. Roz describes the story as a simple romance, deliberately omitting the fact that it is actually a devastating tragedy. Dawana jumps up in shock after being told she is merely a nameless, insignificant extra in the story's hierarchy. Roz hides a satisfied chuckle behind her hand, enjoying the blonde woman's visible distress over her lowly status. When Gyoru demands to know who the main character is, Roz confirms that she herself holds the lead role. Gyoru looks at Roz with hidden contempt, judging her style and arrogantly believing she could look far better herself. Gyoru asks about Count Wen's, assuming the male lead will be as predictable as the woman he is with. Rose explains the setting where she fell for the handsome Eric at first sight and relentlessly pursued his cold heart. Gyoru touches her chin thoughtfully, claiming she hasn't seen anyone particularly good-looking in this world yet. Roz admits the Count is cold to her, causing Gyoru to gasp in a display of faux concerned disbelief. Seeing through the fake comfort, Roz vows never to fall for her former friend's manipulative and predatory tactics again. The doors fly open with a sudden bang as the black-haired Count Eric enters, complaining about his heavy workload. Taken aback by his sudden appearance, Gyoru whispers to Roz, asking for the identity of the striking newcomer. Roz formally introduces her husband, the handsome and imposing Count Eric de Wentz, to her visiting friend. Gyoru stares at the Count with a flushed face, her predatory habit of wanting what belongs to Roz instantly resurfacing. Roz watches the old cycle begin anew, wondering if she should intervene or let Gyoru ruin her own fate. Gyoru performs a graceful curtsy, introducing herself with a polite tone that masks her sudden, intense interest in the Count. She presents herself as Dawana, a close friend, while Eric looks on with a detached and somewhat surprised expression. Roz reflects on the irony of the situation, noting that Gyoru is once again choosing the path to her ruin. Flattering the Count, Gyoru claims she has heard many great things about him and finds them all to be true. Gearous greed consumes her as she imagines herself as the wealthy countess, standing beside the handsome, powerful man. With a smug smile, Gyoru concludes that she suits the role of countess better, and that the world revolves around her. Eric and Gyoru remain close as Rose excuses herself, claiming she does not feel well. The pink-haired woman walks away quickly as a concerned voice calls out to her from behind. Rose reflects on Gyoru's betrayal, deciding that trash belongs with trash, while vowing to escape this place. Clutching her fist, Rose realizes she can conveniently eliminate both her enemies at once in this world. A soft hum sounds as Rose settles into her chair, determined never to be a pushover again. The pink-haired woman recalls how Rose's past desperation to marry Eric led to her family's total ruin. Memories of Rose's parents cutting ties with her over her obsession with Eric haunt her present thoughts. Standing alone with her luggage, Rose worries that her estranged family might reject her if she returns. She closes her eyes, realizing that a divorce without family support would leave her completely homeless. A sudden, loud scrape sounding as Rose rejects that fate, vowing to live an amazing life instead. Rose decides that survival requires information and declares her intent to begin studying immediately. A sudden, quick click sounding as Rose opens her door, calling for the maids to find the butler. The two maids look at each other in surprise when the madam unexpectedly asks for Mr. Gwen. A sudden, soft slurp sounding as Rose drinks tea, formally requesting a tutor for her education. The butler looks up through his monocle, politely inquiring about the reason for her sudden academic interest. Rose explains that as the countess, she must understand high society and how the world works. Mr. Gwen is impressed by Rose's determination to look forward rather than rely solely on her husband. The butler agrees to help, leaving Rose feeling relieved that their first conversation went so well. Rose notices a strange tension among the servants while overhearing Gyoru's giggling voice from a nearby room. Rose spots Eric and Gyoru together, scoffing at their blatant lack of discretion during the broad daylight. Unfazed by the infidelity, Rose walks away, focused only on making a fresh start for her own future. Eric asks the butler about Rose's request, learning she wants a governess to begin her studies. He scoffs, remembering how Rose previously refused to lift a finger despite his earlier suggestions. Eric dismissively tells the butler to handle the matter himself, wanting no involvement in Rose's affairs. Mr. Gwen bows in understanding as the black-haired count turns away to focus on his own interests. Gyoru cuddles with Eric, who affectionately mentions he let her sleep more after she overdid it yesterday. Eric glares intensely, coldly advising the butler to leave if he has nothing else left to say. The butler scampers away in a hurry as Eric and Gyoru remain alone together in the bedroom. A sudden, loud bang sounds as the heavy doors, adorned with a lion's head, slam shut. Inside the room, Eric and Gyoru share an intimate moment together while the atmosphere remains warm. Eric teases Gyoru about how much she enjoyed herself before she eventually passed out from exhaustion. While she claims it was amazing, Gyoru secretly mocks Eric's performance, thinking he is nothing special. A sudden, loud rip sounding as Rose screams in frustration, overwhelmed by the difficulty of her first lesson. The tutor explains how Rose's family fell from power during a struggle involving Grand Duke Arteum. Rose realizes she foolishly married Eric, the very man who orchestrated her family's decline into ruin. The governess describes the history of the throne and the rise of a troublemaker crown prince. She warns Rose that the crown prince is a ruthless man who should be avoided at all costs. Rose recalls that the prince was eventually executed, deciding to remain cautious despite his supposed fate. A sudden, startled wah escapes as a maid informs Rose that the carriage for the auction is ready. Rose laughs nervously, scolding her past self's idiocy for ever caring about a gift from that jerk. Arriving at the grand building, Rose spots a sapphire necklace and a letter amidst a dark background. Visions of a broken necklace and a past tragedy flash before Rose as she enters the auction hall. Rose stands near a blonde-haired man who is already seated comfortably in a large, ornate chair. A sudden, soft tap sounding as Rose informs the seated stranger that he is in her seat. The blonde-haired man looks up with a cold gaze, questioning since when seats were assigned there. A man in a red uniform gasps in horror as Rose continues her confrontation with the stranger. The uniformed man frantically explains that the number Rose is holding is for bidding, not a seat. Horror washes over Rose as she realizes she just demanded a stranger move for absolutely no reason. The blonde-haired man stands up as the assistant begs for his forgiveness regarding Rose's embarrassing mistake. A sudden, quick swish, sounding as Rose recoils in terror from a hand reaching out toward her. Desperate to fix her mistake, Rose bows before Grand Duke Artyom, frantically apologizing for her earlier ignorance. With her head lowered in shame, the pink-haired woman begs the stoic Grand Duke for his sincere forgiveness. Rose notices that Artyom seems calm, deciding to seize the moment and quietly slip away before things escalate. Her escape is thwarted by a sudden, commanding order to sit, as the blonde-haired man questions her hearing. A soft, frustrated groan of, "Ugh," escapes Rose as she realizes she is trapped by the smug Grand Duke's demands. Reluctantly taking her seat, Rose decides to stay silent and invisible to avoid further provoking the intimidating nobleman. The auction begins with a flurry of gems and jewelry as the host declares that only the highest offers win. Bids escalate rapidly among the wealthy nobles, with numbers jumping from 30 million to 35 million res in seconds. Watching the spectacle, Rose reflects on the staggering wealth of the nobility and the familiar value of their currency. The auctioneer unveils a massive sapphire necklace called Luna's Tear, triggering a wave of excitement throughout the crowded hall. Bidding reaches a fever pitch as the price for the stunning blue gemstones skyrockets to 80 million res. Rose recalls that the necklace is a counterfeit, remembering how the betrayal regarding the fake once ruined her husband. Artyom shocks Rose by raising his paddle, casually placing a massive bid of 100 million res for the sapphire. The price continues its relentless climb toward 125 million as Rose watches the disaster unfold in horror. Panic sets in for Rose, who realizes she must intervene before the Grand Duke wastes a fortune on a fake. As Artyom begins to bid even higher, Rose prepares to stop him from making a truly catastrophic financial mistake. Lunging forward, Rose grabs the Grand Duke's arm and desperately shouts for him to stop the purchase immediately. Rose frantically warns the stunned Artyom that buying the necklace now would be equivalent to throwing his money away. The blonde-haired man stares at her with a chilling, detached gaze, coldly questioning why his finances concern her. A sudden, startled, "Ah!" escapes Rose as she recoils under the weight of the Grand Duke's intimidating and suspicious stare. Frustrated by her own meddlesome habits, Rose laments her impulsive decision, while Artyom continues to observe her closely. Rose bluntly declares the necklace a fake, prompting Artyom to warn her of the consequences of insulting the host. Fidgeting nervously, Rose explains that the auction host likely has no idea they are selling a counterfeit sapphire. Artyom warns her that she will pay dearly for her interference if the tear of Luna proves to be authentic. Addressing her formally as Countess Wenz, the Grand Duke leaves Rose stunned that he already knows her true identity. A sudden, loud bang sounds as the auctioneer hammers his gavel, finalizing the sale for 3.6 billion less. Artyom wears a challenging smile as Rose panics internally, wondering how she will survive the coming fallout. Believing her life is on the line, Rose impulsively declares she will bet her very life on her claim. Rose immediately regrets her dramatic words, realizing she just accidentally escalated a neck bet into a life and death gamble. Waving her hands in a frantic blur, Rose tries to take back her words as she realizes the stakes. A sudden, soft tap sounding as Artyom touches her shoulder, mocking her sincerity while accepting her dangerous wager. Flustered and horrified, Rose continues to stammer that she didn't mean to stake her life on the fake necklace. Rose watches the imposing Grand Duke Artyom walk away, his presence looming over her like a dark and heavy cloud. A sudden, quick clatter sounding as the carriage moves, leaving Artyom to wonder if he should have ignored Rose's warning. Relaxing into the seat, the Grand Duke decides he can always buy the gem later if his suspicions prove true. Artyom reflects on Rose's sudden appearance, noting her striking resemblance to the influential Lady Serviat from his past. Memories of a grand mansion and a shy, young Rose hiding behind her mother's dress haunt the man's thoughts. In the memory, a young Rose cries out in disappointment that the blonde-haired boy is not her true prince. The child runs away while shouting that he isn't the prince, leaving the young blonde-haired boy standing alone. Artyom looks at his reflection, smiling as he recalls how cute Rose looked even when she was crying. Rose buries her face in her hands in the carriage, completely overwhelmed by her interaction with the Grand Duke. Her escort knight, Cern, asks if she made a mistake with the Duke, while Rose dejectedly admits she did. Cern offers a kind smile, reassuring Rose that he will protect her regardless of what happens with the nobility. The black-haired knight whispers to her, questioning how such a high-profile auction could possibly be selling a fake item. Rose thoughtfully explains her theory that someone must have switched the real gemstone for a counterfeit behind the scenes. Cern looks at her in shock, his eyes wide as he asks how she could possibly know such a secret. Rose quickly raises a finger to shush the knight, signaling that their conversation about the forgery must remain strictly confidential. Claiming she saw it in a dream, Rose hides the truth while Cern worries about her mental state. Later, Rose is back at her desk studying when a sudden, loud shout of her name interrupts her focus. Gyoru leans over her shoulder with a sharp look, demandingly asking what Rose is constantly staring at on those papers. A sudden, weary sigh sounding as Rose sits at her desk, while the blonde-haired maid mentions she is bored. A sudden, soft rustle sounding as Gyoru holds a paper, remarking that Rose has no one to keep her company. Leaning over the table, Gyoru asks if Rose feels lonely and suggests that the Count should be kinder to her. Rose laughs, noticing Gyoru's new earrings and assuming they must be a thoughtful gift from her husband, Eric. Gyoru giggles, confirming they were a gift from her new boyfriend, as both women share a moment of fake laughter. Rose's expression hardens as she realizes Gyoru's smile masks a smug sense of superiority over secretly taking her husband. Quickly recovering, the pink-haired woman feigns innocence and apologizes for staring at the pretty earrings for too long. Gyoru proudly touches her jewelry, marveling at how perfectly her mysterious boyfriend managed to pick out her favorite style. When Rose asks how they met, the blonde-haired maid claims it was destiny and fate that brought them together. A sudden, soft tap sounding as Gyoru leans against the desk, declaring her new boyfriend to be absolutely perfect. Jorah's eye gleams with ambition as she secretly reflects on her perfect plan to eventually become the new countess. Memories of a past life haunt Gyoru, recalling how she was once disowned for stealing a husband from her friend. Gyoru views her rebirth as a chance to finally live at her true level, while mocking Rose's current struggles. Rose reflects on her own past, remembering how a see-through friend once betrayed her trust during a moment of weakness. Looking down at her paperwork, Rose wonders how pathetic she must look to others in her current miserable state. The butler suddenly interrupts the room to deliver a letter, surprising both the pink-haired woman and the blonde maid. Rose opens the letter while Gyoru watches suspiciously, certain that Rose has no connections left in high society. A sudden, sharp snap sounding as the letter is opened, revealing a message that catches Rose completely off guard. Gyoru peers at the paper, curiously wondering if it could be one of the prestigious party invitations she's heard about. Rose clarifies that it is indeed a party invitation for guests to dress up and mingle with other nobles. Gyoru excitedly asks to attend, but Rose lets out a dry, dismissive laugh at the audacity of the maid's request. Rose explains that only nobles are permitted, and the guards would surely slam the door in a maid's face. Mockingly, Rose offers to let Gyoru attend as her personal servant, leaving the blonde-haired maid speechless and deeply offended. Furious at the insult, Gyoru fumes, while Rose claims she was only thinking of her friend's best interests. Holding the invitation close, Rose insists her words were sincere, while Gyoru struggles to maintain her composure. Gyoru forces a smile, claiming she is only slightly disappointed, while privately deciding that Rose is incredibly annoying. Rose notes Gyoru's obviously fake smile, before turning her attention to the mysterious sender of the formal invitation. Horror washes over Rose as she reads the name of Grand Duke Artyom, wondering why he would contact her. Rose reflects on how her actions changed the story, leading to this unexpected invitation to the blonde-haired Duke's salon. Observing the envelope, Rose suspects the invitation is tied to the Tears of Luna necklace and the Empress. Rose recalls the palace's attempts to hide the counterfeit necklace scandal and Artyom's likely knowledge of the forgery. Looking at the blonde-haired man's image, Rose considers his grim fate while wondering how to handle his invitation. Despite her fear, Rose decides to attend the party to observe the social scene, shaking off her initial shock. Gyoru watches Rose's sudden change in mood, refusing to follow her like a lackey to any noble gathering. Determined, the blonde-haired maid bites her finger while searching for a way to secure her own invitation. A sudden, loud swish sounding as Gyoru flings open the wardrobe. intending to find something to wear. Gyoru scoffs at the tacky clothes, vowing to replace everything once she has successfully replaced Rose as the Countess. Looking in the mirror, Gyoru decides she will simply ask the Count to take her to the party himself. Gyoru admires her reflection among floating roses, convinced that noble attire looks far better on her than on Rose. Rummaging through a drawer, Gyoru is confused to find a pair of baby shoes hidden away among the treasures. Gyoru scoffs at the useless memento, heartlessly noting that Rose miscarried and has no need for such things. Recalling her past views on children, Gyoru thinks looking after babies is a waste of time better spent on herself. Caught in the act, Gyoru spins around and casually asks Rose if she can borrow something for the party. Gyoru continues to act like a helpful friend, while Rose watches her with a look of growing disdain and suspicion. A sudden, frantic rush sounding as Rose lunges toward Gyoru to reclaim the precious item she found. Rose desperately guards the memento, shouting that the blonde-haired maid is absolutely forbidden from touching this specific one. Clutching the item close, Rose's eyes well with tears as she experiences a sudden wave of deep emotional pain. Gyoru mockingly laughs to herself, finding Rose utterly charmless while gloating over the gifts she received from the Count. Smugly, Gyoru offers to speak to the Count on Rose's behalf, suggesting he might listen if she is the one asking. Gyoru reveals her appointment as the Count's personal maid, boasting about their intimate time together and his secret affection. Rose clenches her dress, bitterness welling up as she reflects on the Count's persistent coldness toward her. The blonde-haired maid wears a smug expression while Rose walks away, reflecting that the original Rose would be crushed. Looking away, the pink-haired woman reminds herself that she is not actually the real Rose from the story. Wiping her eye, Rose vows to let the maid keep chasing her life, finding her ambition more pitiful than threatening. Entering the study, Rose finds the floor littered with papers and realizes she has stumbled upon a chaotic mess. Rose begins picking up the scattered documents, noting how the room appears to have been hit by a sudden gust. Holding the papers, Rose wonders if the wind was responsible for spreading the Count's private correspondence across the entire floor. Rose reads a chilling plan to murder the Grand Duke by mimicking the late Emperor's illness to avoid suspicion. Rose's eyes widen in horror as she realizes the conspiracy aims to destroy Duke Artyom's reputation before his execution. Gasping in shock, Rose struggles to process the lethal secrets she has just uncovered within the misplaced paperwork. Terrified, Rose realizes the conspirators are targeting the Empress's son next and fears for her own life if she speaks. A sudden, loud bang, sounding as the black-haired Count Eric slams the door open, looking absolutely livid. Eric demandingly asks what Rose is doing in his study after hearing about her presence from the maid, Dawana. Startled, Rose turns toward the open window, her pink hair whipping around as the wind continues to howl through. Trying to remain calm, Rose realizes she must act completely natural to avoid Eric suspecting she read the secret papers. Approaching Eric, Rose calmly explains the mess and offers to help him organize the documents scattered on the floor. Eric roughly grabs Rose's hand, his expression darkening as he commandingly tells her to get her hands off his things. Looming over her, Eric suspiciously asks if Rose read the documents and demands to know her business in his study. Flinching, Rose claims she came for her private lessons and entered without thinking, hiding her internal panic behind a facade. Rose explains she only meant to close the window, while Eric recalls his previous permission for her to use the room. Brushing his hair back, Eric tells Rose to stay out of the study, dismissing her while holding the sensitive documents. Eric orders Rose to rest until dinner as he leaves, leaving her worried about the Duke's safety and her lessons. Alone and distressed, Rose wonders how she can possibly handle the dangerous information regarding Grand Duke Artyom's impending fate. Later that evening, a tense silence fills the room as Rose and the black-haired Count Eric eat dinner together. Eric watches Rose intently across the table, his gaze sharp and calculating as they eat their meal in silence. Eric suggests taking a trip together, prompting Rose to internally question why he isn't taking his mistress instead. Rose politely declines the invitation, claiming she already has other plans, much to the Count's visible surprise and irritation. Eric is bewildered by her refusal, remembering how Rose used to make a massive fuss over her upcoming birthday. Rose casually mentions she received an invitation from Grand Duke Artyom, causing the atmosphere in the room to shift instantly. A sudden, sharp clack, sounding as Eric slams his fork down, demanding to know if the Duke invited her alone. Eric's face darkens with suspicion as he repeats his question, unable to believe the Grand Duke would contact Rose personally. Rose confirms the invitation while Eric's jealousy flares, his mind racing to understand her secret connection to the Duke. Eric points at her demandingly, questioning how she could have a connection to a man she has supposedly never met. Irritated by the interrogation, Rose lies that she encountered the Duke at the auction while shopping for Eric's birthday gift. Eric is conflicted, wondering why Rose would shop for his gift while pretending to forget his own birthday. Convinced that Rose is just playing hard to get, Eric smugly decides to be generous and let her behavior slide. Eric looks at the invitation, dismissing the Duke's intentions while secretly planning his next move to maintain control. Smiling, Eric agrees to postpone the trip and decides he will attend the Grand Duke's banquet alongside Rose. A sinister smile plays on someone's lips as they reflect that the upcoming party will be the Duke's final appearance. The scene shifts as the sound of quick, light footsteps along the carpeted hallway signals a change in focus. The blonde-haired maid, Doana, recalls her low status while harboring resentment toward the knight who treats her like a plaything. Doana hurriedly shoves past another maid, panicked that she will be late for the Count's personal summons. Bursting into the room, Doana finds the black-haired Eric in a robe, looking displeased by her lack of punctuality. Doana apologizes for her lateness, while Eric reminds her that she has been assigned exclusively to serve his personal needs. Complaining about the Countess's orders, Doana sits on the bed and plays the victim to gain Eric's sympathy. Eric pulls Doana into an embrace, telling her to ignore the Countess and simply follow his commands for the day. Studying intensely, Rose realizes she only has 4 days to memorize the faces and social connections of the entire nobility. Rose identifies Duchess Bella and Eric's mother, Tercia, as her primary obstacles, deciding to target younger, unmarried socialites instead. Overwhelmed by her task, Rose laments her inability to return to the study to gather more evidence for her plan. A sudden, startled gasp as Rose realizes Eric has walked into the room without her noticing his quiet arrival. Rose flinches as a gloved hand reaches for her, her purple eyes wide with sudden surprise. Eric snaps at Rose, rejecting her touch while clarifying he was not asking for her hand in that moment. Eric demandingly asks for his birthday gift after catching Rose sitting near a beautifully wrapped present on the table. Rose apologetically claims she has not prepared a gift, only for Eric to point suspiciously at the box beside her. A sudden, sharp slap, sounding as Eric explodes in a jealous rage, accusing Rose of favoring the Grand Duke. Eric roughly pulls Rose closer, his face twisted in fury as she trembles in fear of his escalating aggression. Rose desperately argues that she must show gratitude as a noblewoman, defending her decision to bring a gift. Clutching the memento, Rose looks away sadly, reflecting on the original Rose's futile struggle to win Eric's affection. A sudden, low rumble, sounding as the carriage arrives at the party, with Eric and Rose sitting in silence. Stepping out, Rose's elegant heel catches, causing a sudden, quick screech, sounding as she loses her balance. Horror grips Rose as she falls forward, terrified that a public tumble will ruin her dress and her dignity. Rose prepares for the impact as she plunges toward the ground, certain that her night is over before beginning. A sudden, muffled thump, sounding as the blonde-haired Duke catches Rose, preventing her from falling onto the pavement. Grand Duke Artyom smiles as he greets a stunned Rose, noting that it has been quite some time. A sudden, loud snap, sounding as Eric aggressively grabs Rose's other hand, interrupting the Duke's polite gesture. Eric pulls Rose toward himself with a possessive sneer, accusing the Grand Duke of being overly interested in her. A sudden, tight squeeze, sounding as the two powerful men lock eyes in a silent, high-stakes battle of wills. Unfazed, the blonde-haired Duke mocks Eric's sudden possessiveness, pointing out that Eric normally acts completely indifferent toward Rose. Rose cries out in pain as Eric's grip becomes a sudden, sharp crack, sounding against her delicate wrist. Artyom sternly lectures Eric for hurting Rose, demanding that he show at least a modicum of concern for her. Fuming, Eric roughly drags Rose away, claiming they need quality time, while his eyes burn with unspoken resentment. Watching them depart, Artyom stands alone, his calm facade hiding deep thoughts about the volatile and tense situation. Approaching Eric, the Duke whispers a chilling warning about hiding one's claws while playing the role of a gentleman. Artyom walks past Eric with a dismissive smirk, advising him to watch his behavior inside the crowded banquet hall. Left alone outside the Grand Palace, Eric mutters curses at the Duke, calling him a pompous bastard in the moonlight. Eric points a commanding finger at Rose, threatening her with severe consequences if she dares to cause a scene. Eric vanishes into the party, leaving a bewildered and frustrated Rose alone at the entrance of the grand estate. Rose hesitates at the threshold, lamenting the fact that she must enter the high society gathering without any escort. The announcer heralds the arrival of Countess Roger, causing Rose to brace herself as all eyes turn her way. Duchess Bella peers over her fan with a predatory smile, amused to see Rose arriving under such awkward circumstances. Whispers erupt among the nobles as they mockingly pity Rose for chasing after her unfaithful husband like a chick. Rose maneuvers through the judgmental crowd, realizing that building social alliances will be even harder than she initially anticipated. A sudden, steady click, sounding as Rose walks forward, determined not to let the nobles' insults break her spirit. Eyeing the refreshment table, Rose decides to focus on food while waiting for an opportunity to advance her plan. Rose's eyes widen in surprise as the sudden, crisp splash sounding of wine being poured catches her attention nearby. Artyom appears at Rose's side with a glass in hand, startling her as she tries to blend into the background. The blonde-haired Duke gazes at Rose with an enigmatic smile, clearly enjoying her startled reaction to his sudden presence. Grateful for his help earlier, Rose thanks the Duke for catching her during her clumsy exit from the carriage. Artyom leans in and questions Rose about how she managed to identify the fake moon-tear necklace so easily. Rose panics internally, wondering how to explain her knowledge without revealing that her life is actually a novel's plot. Rose explains that the authentic necklace glows red under light, a detail that leaves the Duke looking quite thoughtful. Hoping to avoid further prying, Rose politely tries to end the conversation before she accidentally reveals far too much. Rose considers making a quiet exit as music begins to swell, fearing things will only get more complicated tonight. Bowing respectfully, Rose bids the Duke a good evening and attempts to walk away from his intense, searching scrutiny. Artyom reaches out and asks Rose for a dance, his gloved hand extended in an invitation she cannot refuse. Rose scans the room for Eric, desperately wanting to avoid the Duke, but finding her husband nowhere in sight. Rose spots Eric flirting and drinking with another woman, causing her to scoff at his utter uselessness as husband. Surrounded by blooming roses, Rose and Artyom begin their dance, their movements fluid as the orchestra plays on beautifully. During the dance, the blonde-haired man continues the conversation, while Rose worries about her lack of formal practice. Artyom pulls Rose close to prevent a stumble, leading her to wonder if he is actually being surprisingly considerate. Surrounded by blooming flowers, Rose and the blonde-haired Duke Artyom dance gracefully, their movements fluid as the music swells. Bowing politely, Rose thanks the Duke for the dance, finally ending their public display of elegance. Whispers erupt among the onlookers, mocking Rose's supposedly lacking skills and questioning her social background behind her back. Rose walks away as the nobles continue to gossip, cruelly pitying Count Eric for having to deal with her. A sudden, firm grasp catches Rose's arm as the black-haired Eric angrily demands to know why she danced with Artyom. Eric looms over Rose, accusing her of acting desperately just to gain the attention of the high-ranking Duke. Her hand trembling, Rose realizes with irritation that Eric still views her through the lens of the original Rose's desperation. Eric's intense gaze fixates on Rose as she clutches her chest, looking genuinely uncomfortable with his sudden, aggressive proximity. Eric roughly pulls Rose into an embrace, smugly asking if she missed this kind of physical affection from him. Looking down at her, Eric claims he doesn't blame her for being upset since he hasn't hugged her in weeks. A sudden, sharp slap, sounding as Rose strikes Eric across the face, rejecting his unwanted advances and arrogance. Rose steps back, coldly claiming they have both had too much to drink before attempting to leave the scene. Fuming with rage and holding his stung cheek, Eric watches as Rose declares she is going to rest and departs. Eric calls out for her to wait as the sudden, quick tap, tap, tap sounding of her heels echoes. Running into the moonlit garden, Rose reflects on Eric's bizarre behavior and how he has been avoiding her lately. Eric smooths his hair and decides to move on, ignoring the passing maid to focus on his own secret plans. A sinister smile plays on Eric's lips as he resolves to focus on his upcoming tasks instead of Rose's defiance. Sitting on a bench, Rose is startled by a pained cry for help echoing from the shadows of the garden. A sudden muffled thump, sounding as Rose worries that the tragic nature of the novel is finally manifesting nearby. Terrified of being seen, Rose prepares to escape, unwilling to let her second life end in an absurd tragedy. Artyom emerges from the darkness, calling out to Rose with a calm expression that contrasts with the tense atmosphere. Artyom questions Rose's presence while she stares in horror at the fresh bloodstains covering his hand and noble attire. Glancing at his own hand, the blonde-haired Duke dryly notes that it is bad manners to offer a bloodstained hand. Rose demands to know if he has just killed someone, her eyes wide with suspicion and mounting fear. Artyom laughs at her accusation, finding her theory of him being a murderer at his own party quite amusing. Rose realizes that a murder at this banquet would actually cause the most harm to the Duke's own reputation. A sudden, steady swish, sounding as Artyom extends his clean hand, admitting his appearance understandably led to her dark conclusion. Artyom invites Rose to follow him, promising to reveal the truth behind the blood and the scream she heard. They find Marquis's blood lying in the grass, his body surrounded by a pool of dark, fresh blood. Artyom explains that he just saved the Marquis from an attack by a mysterious, dangerous monster. Looking at the scene, Rose wonders if the entire situation was just a massive misunderstanding of the Duke's actions. Guards suddenly burst into the clearing, their commander loudly ordering the immediate arrest of the blonde-haired Duke. The white-haired Duke Felice arrives, claiming he always knew Artyom would eventually go too far with his actions. Felice laments the attack on his close friend, while Artyom watches him with a cold, knowing gaze. Rose realizes with a start that this entire scene is a deliberate and calculated trap set for the Duke. A sudden, heavy stomp, sounding as the guards move in, but Rose steps forward to interject. All eyes turn to Rose as she prepares to speak, her expression shifting from shock to sudden, sharp determination. Rose stands her ground against Duke Felice's accusations, refusing to be intimidated by the presence of the guards. Felice sneers at her, demanding to know what right she has to stand in the way of justice. Rose boldly declares that she witnessed the Duke saving the Marquis from a monster, providing a shocking counter-testimony. Duke Felice is visibly shaken, his mind racing to understand how there could possibly be a witness to his scheme. Nearby nobles murmur in confusion, wondering why the party has moved into the garden and what has happened. Felice questions why Rose was even in the garden with the Duke instead of remaining in the banquet hall. Pointing at her soiled hem, Felice assumes Rose will back off to protect her reputation and her husband's social standing. Rose realizes Felice is trying to trap her as well, attempting to shame her into silence. Rose feigns distress, claiming she got lost in the garden while walking with her husband before the attack occurred. Rose spins a frantic tale of the monster's arrival, illustrating how the Duke heroically fought the beast to save her. Rose explains the monster vanished while she went for help, leaving Artyom to watch her performance with silent intrigue. A sudden, quick wink, as Rose flashes a secret, triumphant smile, knowing her quick thinking has turned the tables. Artyom covers his mouth to hide a laugh, clearly impressed by Rose's cleverness and the success of her intervention. Clenching his fist in fury, Duke Felice fumes that his plans failed because his men didn't eliminate all witnesses. The onlookers gossip in hushed tones, finding Rose's testimony about a monster surprising, but far more believable than murder. Duke Felice offers a forced apology, while Rose reflects on his dangerous reputation as a top imperial figure. Suspecting Felice's involvement, Rose maintains her polite facade while bidding him farewell to return to her husband. A quiet peace returns to the garden as the immediate crisis ends, though Rose knows her troubles remain. Rose continues through the moonlight garden, wondering why the blonde-haired Duke Artyom persists in following her. Leaning in close, the blonde-haired man admits he is simply curious about the woman who just saved him. Artyom questions why she would risk her reputation to help him, instead of just walking away from the scene. He reflects on his own dark reputation, finding it fascinating that she chose trust over public perception. Rose offers a bright, genuine smile, relieved to have successfully navigated the trap set for the Duke. Artyom acknowledges her kindness, appreciating that she treated him as a gentleman despite his blood-soaked appearance. Flashing a playful grin, Rose claims she was merely returning the favor he showed her earlier that evening. Rose turns away, her face flushing as she insists that her help wasn't given with strings attached. Seizing the moment, Rose urgently asks for his help in finally securing a divorce from her unfaithful husband. Artyom is surprised by the request, but agrees that Eric is hardly a decent man worth keeping. Determined to start anew, Rose declares her intent to correct her past mistakes and live life differently. A sudden, loud pff, sounding as the Duke laughs, finding her blunt and sudden request incredibly entertaining. Touching her hand reassuringly, he calls it a wise decision and mentions her family's likely approval. They discuss the Earl of Serviette, with the Duke revealing his occasional business dealings with her father. A sudden, warm glow surrounding Rose as she realizes the depth of her parents' enduring trust in her. Rose reflects on her past choices and her parents' unwavering support during her 3 years of marriage. Smiling warmly, she asks the Duke to send her parents word of her impending visit. When questioned about her timeline, Rose firmly states she wants the divorce finalized as soon as possible. Artyom notes that legal paperwork is simple, making him wonder how he can truly be of use. Rose looks ahead thoughtfully, her mind already racing with the logistical challenges of her new life. Bowing slightly, Rose sheepishly asks if he could lend her some money to start her independent journey. Artyom laughs at her unpredictability, while Rose insists she is being perfectly serious about her financial needs. A sudden, sharp shout of "Rose!" echoes through the garden, signaling Eric's unwelcome and angry arrival. Eric approaches with a heavy stumble, visibly disheveled as he angrily accuses Rose of making another mess. Rose scoffs, noticing Eric's disarray and realizing he has been up to no good with other women. Preparing to leave, Rose politely suggests resuming their conversation with the Duke at a more convenient private time. The Duke agrees to send a messenger to her estate, much to Rose's sudden and visible alarm. Rose frantically begs him not to, fearing Eric's explosive reaction to any interaction with another nobleman. Recalling Eric's jealous rants, Rose promises to initiate contact herself to avoid any unnecessary domestic torment. Bidding him a quick farewell, Rose hurries away from the garden to deal with her approaching husband. Artyom stands alone, watching her retreat with a thoughtful expression as the moonlight catches his golden hair. He wonders if her request for money was sincere or just a clever excuse to maintain their connection. Walking away, the Duke muses on how Rose is sharp yet entirely unpredictable in her behavior. He finds her composure during the earlier danger impressive, noting she didn't even scream at the sight. A sudden, rustling crunch, sounding as a subordinate approaches the Duke to receive his next orders. Artyom commands his men to clean up the mess and eliminate any traces of the failed assassination attempt. With a smirk, he orders protection for Rose, acknowledging that she did indeed save his life tonight. Days later, the blonde-haired Duke sits in his office, looking visibly impatient and distracted by his thoughts. His red-haired secretary mentions an imperial letter, but the Duke dismisses it, clearly waiting for something else. The secretary notes there is nothing else of importance, leaving the Duke staring at his empty desk. A sudden, rhythmic tap, tap, sounding as the Duke asks about visitors, confusing his loyal subordinate. Realizing his own previous orders might have backfired, the Duke stands up in a sudden, sliding rush. The secretary clarifies that not a single soul has attempted to visit the estate recently. Hidden beneath a brown cloak, a nervous Rose finally stands at the threshold of the Duke's grand estate. Rose, disguised in a yellow wig and brown hood, nervously paces outside the Duke's grand estate gates. Rose gasps in shock as she imagines the worst-case scenario if the Duke fails to recognize her. Rose imagines Eric callously throwing coins at her, demanding she leave after discovering her secret visit to the Duke. Rose shakes her head to dismiss her fears, suddenly startled by a loud voice calling out to her. A stern guard confronts the hooded Rose, demanding to know why she is loitering around the estate's perimeter. Rose quickly fabricates a lie, claiming her master sent her to deliver a special item to the Grand Duke. The guard remains suspicious, but Rose notices the red-haired aide approaching from within the estate grounds. The red-haired aide politely invites Rose inside, surprising her with his unexpectedly welcoming and professional demeanor. Inside the grand mansion, Rose sits on a plush green couch while the aide asks her to wait. The red-haired aide instructs an older maid to bring tea for their guest, impressing Rose with the service. Rose reflects on the butler's impressive efficiency, noting that he seems very young to hold such a position. The red-haired aide bows respectfully, informing Rose that the Grand Duke has been eagerly awaiting her visit. Rose is startled as Duke Artyom appears behind the aide, smiling warmly at his mysterious visitor. Duke Artyom greets Rose, remarking on the time that has passed since their last encounter at the banquet. The scene shifts to Duke Felice seething with frustration over the failure of his previous assassination plot. Felice laments the missed opportunity to eliminate Artyom, noting that Count Wen's wife has become a significant obstacle. Nearby nobles whisper mockingly about Count Wentz, noting his inability to control his own household during the crisis. Duke Felice silences the murmurs with a sharp glare, inwardly vowing to ensure such a failure never happens again. A sudden, loud crash sounding as Eric Wenz kicks a table in a fit of uncontrollable rage. Eric screams in frustration, blaming Rose for the humiliation he suffered in front of the other noble families. Seething with regret, Eric curses the day he allowed a member of the Serbiet family into his house. A 1-month deadline is set for Eric to resolve the situation, leaving him fuming in the darkness. Back at the estate, Rose sits on the couch, her hood lowered to reveal her yellow wig. Artyom finds Rose's appearance amusing, thinking her wig makes her look exactly like his dog Finn. Reaching out, Artyom gently touches Rose's hair as he questions the authenticity of her blonde tresses. A warm flashback shows a younger Artyom happily playing with his large, golden-haired pet dog named Finn. A sudden, quick snap, sounding as Rose removes the yellow wig, laughing while revealing her natural pink hair. Rose presents a gift box to the Duke, wanting to give it to him before they discuss business. Rose explains she intended to give him the gift at the banquet, but the situation became too chaotic. A flashback reveals Rose holding the gift box during the party, right before the attack in the garden. Duke Artyom gazes at the small box with curiosity, wondering what kind of gift the Countess prepared. Rose gestures toward the gift, offering to find something better if the current present does not please him. A sudden, soft rustle, sounding as Artyom carefully unties the ribbon and opens the gift box. Inside the box lies a magnificent blue topaz brooch, glowing with a brilliant and ethereal light. Artyom examines the brooch thoughtfully, noting its unique design and the unusual choice of gemstone. Chibi Rose beams with excitement, eagerly asking the Duke if he likes the gift she chose. Artyom pins the brooch to his vest and smiles, asking Rose for her opinion on how it looks. Stepping closer, Rose gently adjusts the brooch on his chest, ensuring it is perfectly positioned. Rose looks into Artyom's eyes, asking if he knows the symbolic meaning behind the blue topaz gemstone. A chilling flashback to the novel's plot shows the Duke lying dead in a pool of blood. Artyom watches Rose with a steady gaze, waiting for her to explain the significance of her gift. Rose declares that she does not want him to die, revealing that the brooch symbolizes her protective wish. A sudden, heavy silence as Rose reflects on her gamble, hoping the Duke will trust her warning. Artyom looks at her with intense focus, his expression shifting as he processes her shocking words. Leaning in close, the Duke remarks that she must know a way to prevent his destined death. Artyom smiles enigmatically and invites Rose to tell him the full story behind her knowledge and her gift. A sudden, steady tick-tock, sounding as the scene shifts to the Wenz estate late at night. A flashback reveals Rose begging her maid Jane to pretend to be her while she sneaks away. Jane looks terrified, worrying about the danger of pretending to be the Countess in front of the Count. The door bursts open as the black-haired Eric enters the chambers, catching the disguised maid off guard. Eric demands a response from the trembling pink-haired woman, his presence casting a dark, oppressive shadow over the room. A sudden, sharp grip, sounding as Eric forcefully seizes the woman's chin, compelling her to meet his angry gaze. Eric blames the pink-haired woman for his public humiliation, threatening her with a harsh lesson for her perceived insolence. A sudden, loud thump, sounding as a blonde-haired maid interrupts, urgently calling the Count away for an important matter. Eric insults the pink-haired woman's worth as a lady before following the blonde maid out into the hallway. The pink-haired woman sits alone, desperately hoping the real lady returns before their dangerous deception is discovered. Back at the Duke's estate, the pink-haired Rose tells Artyom they must focus on strategically shifting public opinion. A sudden, soft poke, sounding as Artyom reflects on his grim reputation as the Empire's feared and cold-blooded butcher. Rose challenges the Duke's acceptance of his bad reputation, insisting that his public image is a significant obstacle. A sudden, quick swish, sounding as Rose turns her head, her attention caught by a sudden movement behind her. A sudden, loud woof, sounding as the golden dog Finn leaps at Rose, causing her to lose her footing. A sudden, sharp oof, sounding as Artyom catches the falling Rose while they are both drenched by splashing water. Rose realizes she is floating, while the red-haired aide frantically chases after the mischievous golden dog, Finn. The red-haired aide apologizes for Finn's behavior, struggling to restrain the energetic golden dog in his arms. Rose asks the Duke about her body lifting off the ground, causing the red-haired aide to sweat nervously. The aide suggests a change of clothes with a nervous laugh, but the blonde Duke dismisses the idea. Rose stands in surprise, now wearing the Duke's white shirt to keep her warm after their watery mishap. A sudden, soft rustle, sounding as the shirtless Artyom gently drapes his own garment over Rose's shoulders. The red-haired aide scolds the Duke for using magic, while the shirtless Artyom defends his quick, protective instincts. Rose reflects on the Duke's genuine concern for her well-being, deciding to keep her thoughts to herself for now. Artyom asks Rose to explain how his reputation is linked to a death sentence, watching her with intense curiosity. Rose reveals she found documents in Eric's study, outlining a plot to justify his execution using his bad reputation. Recalling the banquet, Rose notes how the noble's behavior seemed to be a calculated part of the assassination plan. Rose contemplates the former empress's possible involvement, but decides she needs solid proof before speaking any further. Surrounded by flowers, Rose offers a determined smile and promises the Duke she will ensure he survives the plot. Artyom watches Rose with a pensive gaze, worried that her proximity to Count Wen's puts her at extreme risk. A sudden, warm flush, feeling as Rose thanks the Duke, expressing that she feels indebted to him once more. Reaching out, Artyom asks Rose to give him the opportunity to finally repay the kindness she has shown him. The scene shifts as the Duke and Rose sit across from each other, preparing to discuss their business arrangement. Rose decides to ask for divorce funds now, fearing any delay might lead the Duke to the wrong conclusion. A sudden, quick tap, sounding as the Duke encourages Rose to name any amount she needs without hesitation. Rose swallows hard in a sudden, soft gulp, sounding stunned by the Duke's immediate and total willingness to help. Artyom gives a sudden, polite nod, sounding as he sips his tea, awaiting her response with calm, steady interest. Artyom spits out his tea in a sudden, loud poof, sounding as Rose boldly asks for 10 billion res. Rose clarifies that she isn't asking for charity and fully intends to pay back every single borrowed coin. Artyom looks at her steadily, his expression showing a mix of surprise and intrigue at her massive request. A bag of gold representing an immense fortune rests on the table, enough to fund an entire commercial district. Rose looks hopeful while the Duke muses over the 10 billion res figure, repeating the astronomical sum with shock. A sudden, heavy thud, sounding as Rose is shocked when the Duke casually agrees to provide the massive sum. Stunned, Rose asks if he is truly going to lend her such an immense fortune just like that. Artyom agrees to the loan on the condition that she answers one important question about her future. Leaning forward, the Duke asks for a detailed explanation of how she intends to use the 10 billion res. Rose presents her ambitious vision to start a grand department store business once her divorce is finalized. Artyom finds her business ambition fascinating and asks her to explain more about the department store concept. A sudden, sharp slap, sounding as Chibi Rose uses a chalkboard to lecture on the mechanics of a department store. Rose explains how gathering multiple luxury shops under one roof provides unparalleled convenience and appeal for consumers. She highlights that creating a central infrastructure will allow her business to outmatch and replace the existing market. Rose reveals her plan to take a sales commission instead of rent, ensuring a share in the store's success. Focusing on luxury goods, Rose explains her strategy to sell upscale products at a premium over normal prices. Duke Artyom acknowledges that higher prices for luxury goods will appeal to nobles seeking status and prestige. A firm handshake seals the agreement between the lace-gloved woman and the man wearing a ruby ring. Dressed in her maid disguise, pink-haired Rose asks the Duke if the massive investment is truly worthwhile. Duke Artyom stands confidently with his arms crossed, wearing the blue topaz brooch Rose gifted him earlier. The moon hangs over the silent palace walls as someone moves stealthily through the dark garden bushes. Pink-haired Rose peers anxiously from behind the greenery, her face reflecting the tension of her secret mission. Rose recalls swapping clothes with Jane and promises to return by 7 while worrying about her maid's safety. Rose is jolted by a sudden shock as a hand reaches out from the shadows to touch her shoulder. The black-haired Cern pulls Rose close and shushes her, ensuring they remain undetected in the dark night. Lifting the pink-haired Rose into his arms, Cerny promises to get her back inside as quietly as possible. Dark-clad feet move swiftly and silently across the palace balcony as the pair makes their secret entrance. Whispering urgently, Rose asks Cerny if anything suspicious occurred at the estate while she was away. A dark memory flashes of Eric's violent outburst, where he nearly strangled the terrified brown-haired maid. Cern looks at Rose with concern, insisting she needs to know the truth about the danger she faces. Cern observes that Rose still harbors feelings for her husband despite the abuse she has suffered. Watching Rose, Cerny fears that revealing Eric's attempt to strangle her surrogate will break her fragile heart. Late at night, the black-haired Eric lies in bed while a blonde woman watches him sleep. The blonde woman glares at Eric with hidden resentment, cursed by her attraction to his handsome face. A vision of the banquet reflects the breakdown of Eric's reputation as he and Rose stopped speaking. Eric bolts upright in bed, furious at the blonde woman's mockery of his public failure and humiliation. Seething with hatred, Eric declares his intention to divorce Rose within the month to satisfy his mistress. Back at the estate, the blonde-haired maid Doana bursts into the room calling out for Rose. Pink-haired Rose remains composed while reviewing documents, asking the frantic Doana for the reason behind her arrival. Doana leans in with a suspicious smile, prying into the current state of Rose's relationship with the Count. Rose dismisses the concern with a graceful wave, claiming Eric is simply sulking because she lacks affection. Doana watches Rose with a malicious smirk, relishing the fact that the Countess is oblivious to the divorce. A sudden thought of Do-hyun, her husband from a previous life, causes Rose to pause her writing. Rose shudders at the memory of her overbearing former husband, Do-hyun, who constantly suffocated her with attention. Doana attempts to manipulate Rose, advising her to be the one to bridge the gap with Eric. Doana puts on a dramatic performance, feigning humility and claiming she isn't worthy of lecturing the Countess. Rose stares at Doana with intense focus, sensing the treachery behind the maid's offer of support. Inwardly, Rose scoffs at Doana's fake loyalty, knowing the maid is actually hoping for her downfall. A carriage pulls up to the grand entrance as servants bow to the arriving Lord Cedric. Eric's father, Cedric de Wenz, stands in a dark, glowing aura and demands Rose be brought to him. The morning sun illuminates a grand office, setting the stage for a tense and inevitable family confrontation. Rose enters the room to find Cedric, who immediately insults her by comparing her tone to her mother's. Standing tall, Rose questions the reason for Cedric's sudden and unannounced visit to her private chambers. Cedric explodes into a rage, shouting that Rose must support her husband instead of being a political burden. Looming over Rose, Cedric screams his disappointment at her failure to keep Eric useful to their household. Cedric accuses Rose of lacking dignity for siding with the Duke during a delicate political crisis. Rose reflects on Cedric's accusation, realizing his anger stems from her public support of the Grand Duke. Rose snaps back at Cedric, questioning if the real issue is his own son's foolish and incompetent behavior. Rose maintains her composure while realizing that giving Cedric more reason to harass her would delay her plans. Apologizing with a graceful bow, Rose feigns regret to avoid further escalating the confrontation with Lord Cedric. Cedric stares down at Rose with contempt, dismissing her worth and insulting her noble bloodline once again. A red-haired aide with an eye patch watches the scene in silence as Cedric prepares to leave the office. Cedric delivers a final ominous warning, promising that the next time he visits, he won't use just words. Cedric departs, leaving the pink-haired Rose stunned by his sudden arrival and the weight of his threat. The red-haired aide follows Cedric down the hallway, keeping a respectful distance behind his master. Cedric and his aide discuss their hidden assignment, revealing they left a mysterious object in Rose's room. Lord Cedric arrives at the heavy wooden door, his presence signaling the start of a dangerous and unwanted visit. A sudden, sharp creak, sounding as Cedric enters the room, complaining about the messy state of the de Wenz estate. Peeking from behind the door, Jane wonders what brought the Count's father here, only to be met with a shock. The black-haired Cern bows respectfully to his master, causing Jane to freeze in terror at his unexpected presence. Cedric questions Cern about any unusual movements between the Grand Duke and Rose, seeking a reason to intervene. A sudden, soft, sounding as Cedric narrows his eyes, clearly dissatisfied with Cern's report of nothing of note. A flashback memory shows Cerne interrogating a blonde woman, searching for any evidence of Rose meeting the Duke in private. Terrified, Jane worries that if Cern mentions her secret outing, her life and Rose's plans will be ruined. Cern maintains his lie to Cedric, protecting the truth, while the brown-haired Jane watches from the shadows in dread. Cern recalls a dark plot where Princess Diana would be poisoned during a birthday toast to frame the Grand Duke. The vision ends with the blonde Princess Diana poisoned and unconscious, a pawn in a lethal political game. A sudden, soft tap, sounding as Cedric orders Cern to ensure Rose remains isolated from the Grand Duke's influence. A sudden, sharp thud, sounding as Cedric departs, leaving Cern to stare after him with an ominous, red-eyed gaze. Cern turns his attention to the eavesdropping Jane, whose cover is blown the moment their eyes finally meet. Jane confronts Cern, asking if he plans to silence her next after she overheard their dark conversation. A sudden, sharp rustle, sounding as the brown-haired maid declares she is no longer afraid to die in this house. Jane laments that the most terrifying part of her life is the inability to trust anyone anymore. Walking away, Jane warns Sir May never to speak her name or look her in the eye again. A sudden, tight squeeze, sounding as Cern clenches his hand, vowing to do whatever is necessary for Rose's sake. The scene shifts back to Rose's chambers earlier that morning, where the bed remains unmade and the air heavy. A sudden, soft thud, sounding as Dawana relaxes in Rose's room, seeking an escape from the family chaos. A sudden, soft rustle, sounding as Dawana discovers luxury cosmetics and a note written in the Count's handwriting. Seething with jealousy, Dawana assumes Eric is clinging to Rose behind her back despite his promises of a divorce. Dawana decides to steal the luxury cream for herself, spitefully mocking Rose's appearance as she prepares to use it. A sudden, soft rub, sounding as Dawana applies the stolen cream, only to realize it feels strangely wrong. Admiring herself in the mirror, the blonde maid is oblivious to the hidden danger lurking within the cosmetic jar. A sudden, sharp clatter, sounding as the jar slips from Dawana's hand and shatters across the ornate floor. A sudden, loud scream echoes through the halls, alerting the entire estate to a disaster within the Countess's quarters. A sudden, sharp slam, sounding as pink-haired Rose bursts into the room, horrified by the scene unfolding before her. Dawana turns around, her face now covered in horrific, weeping blisters that have ruined her features. The estate doctor examines Dawana's injuries, concluding that she has been hideously burned by a cocktail of various poisons. The doctor warns that while the blisters might heal, permanent scarring is almost a certainty for the distraught Dawana. Dawana flies into a rage, physically attacking the doctor and accusing Rose of being in cahoots with him. A sudden, loud wah, sounding as Dawana clings to Eric, weeping and begging for her lover's protection. Confused by the escalating accusations, Rose watches the frantic doctor try to defend his professional integrity. Eric bluntly denies giving Dawana any gifts, leaving her stunned as he rejects the idea of buying her cosmetics. A sudden, sharp gasp, sounding as Eric realizes the gift was likely a trap set by his own father. A sudden, loud clatter, sounding as various cosmetic bottles are brought in to identify the source of the poison. Eric demands that Dawana point out exactly which jar she used from the collection scattered on the bed. A sudden, quick rustle, sounding as Dawana searches frantically, only to realize the specific jar has mysteriously vanished. A sudden, sharp rustle, sounding as Dawana searches for the jar with the gemstone lid, realizing it is gone. Realizing the note and the cream are missing, Dawana panics as the weight of her mistake sets in. Pointing an accusing finger, Dawana screams that Rose must have ordered someone to destroy the incriminating evidence. A sudden, sharp tap, sounding as the butler dismisses Dawana's claims, stating no such orders were ever given. Looking down at the maid, the butler mocks Dawana's greed for coveting items that were never meant for her. Exhausted by the drama, Eric tells everyone to clear out while he attempts to process this mess. The butler gently escorts Rose from the room, promising to handle the aftermath of the maid's unfortunate accident. Left alone and broken, Dawana weeps over her ruined face, regretting her decision to steal from the Countess. The butler delivers a final lecture, reminding Dawana that her arrogance has led to her own painful downfall. Smoldering with hatred, Dawana vows to take everything from Rose, her jealousy morphing into dangerous, obsessive vengefulness. Dawana bolts upright with a frantic cry, but her strength fails as she collapses back onto the bed. Butler Glenn calls out in alarm, desperately trying to wake the unconscious blonde maid as she falls. In his office, Eric reviews a letter, acknowledging that he has finally received the poison his father left. Seated at his desk, the black-haired Count decides to handle Rose personally to prevent further escalation. Eric stares at the document with a cold expression, inwardly labeling someone an arrogant brat for their defiance. Standing by a stone wall, a black-haired guard is ordered to immediately locate the missing cosmetic cream. Gwen hands the poisonous jar to the guard, requesting a discreet cleanup for the sake of the Countess. Gwen reflects on his 30 years of service, remembering when Lord Cedric was a leader worth following. Disgusted by Cedric's current vile schemes, Gwen resolves to protect Rose from the suffering within this house. Gwen questions the guard's loyalty, asking if he also intends to serve the Countess with the sincere heart. Standing in the darkness, the guard is urged to help put a stop to the family's destructive plots. The doctor informs Eric that Dawana will recover with rest, though her face remains marked by the poison. Beaming with joy, the blonde Dawana shocks the room by announcing she is pregnant with the Count's child. While Dawana celebrates her happy news, Eric looks on with a complicated, thoughtful expression as the doctor departs. Feigning tears, Dawana tells a malicious lie, accusing butler Gwen of attempting to violate her before her collapse. Inwardly, the blonde maid seethes with hatred, vowing to ruin Gwen for standing in her way. Eric initially doubts the claim, but a sudden realization causes him to pause and reconsider his next move. Eric puts on a supportive front, comforting Dawana while promising to handle Gwen so she can rest. Dawana clings to Eric in a tight embrace, relishing her victory while believing he is her only protector. Eric confronts Gwen in the hallway, leaving the elderly butler confused by the sudden and harsh accusations. A sudden, sharp step, sounding as Eric approaches the butler with a cold and predatory intent. Looming over the butler, the black-haired count declares that he cannot overlook such a serious transgression. With a cold and final tone, Eric delivers the blow. Eric delivers the blow, telling the loyal Gwen that he is fired. Eric continues his verbal assault, accusing Gwen of targeting a maid he cherishes as he walks past. Gwen stands frozen in shock as Eric towers over him, his long years of service ending in disgrace. Mocking Gwen's silence, Eric suggests the butler is simply hiding the truth about the missing cosmetics. Eric reveals he doesn't care about the alleged assault, only that Gwen's true loyalty lies with his father. Eric walks away, dismissing Gwen's decades of devotion because it was never directed toward him. The black-haired count delivers a final, chilling command for Gwen to leave before he is forcibly removed. Rose wonders if her attempts to protect Gwen have accidentally caused him trouble with the volatile Eric. A sudden, quick dash, sounding as a maid rushes to Rose, shouting that a terrible disaster has occurred. The maid reports Gwen's dismissal while the former butler stands alone in the rain, looking utterly broken. Walking into exile, Gwen claims to have no regrets about leaving a household that has lost its way. Gwen pauses to look back, his only remaining worry being whether the gentle Rose can survive alone. A sudden, soft gasp, sounding as Rose runs through the rain, desperate to reach her departing friend. Rose reflects on Gwen's constant support and realizes she must find a way to help him in return. Catching up to him, Rose earnestly tells Gwen that she still needs him despite his official firing. Smiling brightly amidst the rain, Rose reveals that she has a business plan requiring his legendary skills. A narrative vision recalls how Gwen once saved the household, highlighting his immense value as a manager. Rose asks the stunned Gwen if he is willing to use his talents to help her rebuild. Rose apologizes for the suddenness of her offer as she watches Gwen's reaction in the downpour. Reaching out, Rose tells Gwen he is always welcome and asks him to contact her soon. Rose bids him farewell, jokingly expecting him to look like a professional company president at their next meeting. Watching from a window, Eric and Dawana mock the dramatic goodbye taking place in the courtyard. Dawana smirks with satisfaction, certain she picked the right man after seeing Gwen cast doubt on her word. Pulling the count close, the blonde mistress dismisses the drama and urges Eric to focus on her instead. A sudden, soft smooch, sounding as Dawana seals her victory with a kiss, vowing never to let go. Back inside, a maid helps a soaked Rose dry off, amazed by the Countess's sudden sprint into the storm. The other maids weep with gratitude, moved by Rose's compassion for the man who served them for decades. Rose calmly asks Jane to bring tea to her room, her mind already moving toward her next strategic move. Pink-haired Rose asks a brown-haired maid to keep a secret, which the girl agrees to do immediately. Though Rose assumes the maid Cerny would understand, the brown-haired girl reacts with an explosive, emphatic rejection. Recalling a romantic moment between Cern and a red-uniformed soldier, Rose ponders the strange shift in their atmosphere. Rose begins to confess a difficult truth just as a sudden, sharp knock sounding interrupts her private moment. Cerny leads another maid into the room, surprising the Countess with the announcement that her evening bath is ready. A luxurious bath awaits Rose, its surface shimmering with a sudden, soft splash sounding from scattered pink petals. Confused by the sudden, soft rustle sounding of the floating flowers, Rose questions the unusual and lavish preparation. A black-haired man in a white robe suddenly embraces Rose from behind, asking if she appreciates the romantic gesture. Startled by the Count's unwanted presence, Rose demands to know why he has entered her private bathing chambers. Disgusted, Rose scathingly notes that he was intimate with another woman only moments before approaching her. Haunted by visions of a past lover named Lee Do-hyun, Rose remembers the pain of being forgotten and replaced. With tears in her eyes, Rose reflects on how her entire world once revolved around the treacherous Do-hyun. A sudden, sharp clatter sounding as Rose rejects the Count's invitation to bed, ordering him to stay away. Seething with loathing, Rose tells Eric to keep his filthy, compromised body far away from her sight. Rose argues that if they were truly a couple, he would respect the boundaries of their marriage. Staring him down, the pink-haired woman declares that he shouldn't dare approach her while still wearing another woman's traces. Eric looks on with frustration, clearly annoyed by Rose's refusal to play the part of a submissive wife. A sudden, loud slam sounding as the door closes, with Eric shouting that she will eventually regret her defiance. Left alone, a weeping Rose struggles to let go of her past life and the lingering memory of Do-hyun. Looking out at the grand estate, Rose feels suffocated and resolves to break free from this toxic household. Down in the kitchens, a dark-haired woman in a black dress questions a blonde maid about the Countess's health. The blonde maid, Doana, smugly reveals that she is pregnant with the Count's child to assert her new power. Shocked by the claim, the dark-haired woman listens as Doana insists the Count has already confirmed the news. A sudden, sharp smack sounding as the blonde maid is struck, reacting with a cry of pain and shock. The dark-haired woman looms over Doana, coldly questioning the fate of the unborn child in such a household. Later, Doana brings tea to Rose's bed, spitefully nagging the Countess for her supposed inability to care for herself. Rose sighs in exhaustion, her head spinning from the combination of sleep deprivation and the maid's constant, biting insults. Doana arrogantly declares that she must be careful now, ordering Rose to have other servants perform her usual chores. Sensing a shift in the maid's behavior, Rose looks up from her tea and asks what is truly happening. Beaming with malicious joy, Doana finally announces to the stunned Countess that she is pregnant. A sudden, sharp splash sounding as Rose spills her tea, calmly asking who the father of the child is. Doana reveals that Eric promised to handle the situation with his wife, emphasizing her supposed victory over Rose. Relishing her ambition, Doana imagines herself ascending to the title of Countess and casting Rose aside forever. The blonde maid vows to carve out her own place in the nobility, certain that Rose's time is ending. Rose reflects on the inevitability of straying hearts, gripping her cup as she processes the betrayal. The two women sit in a tense silence, the gap between their status and their reality widening. Recalling her past life as a dark-haired woman, Rose is fueled by the wretched memories of previous betrayals. A sudden, sharp splash sounding as Rose throws her tea at Doana, demanding a long-overdue apology. Doana bolts upright, shouting that the marriage was never based on love, and mocking Rose's bitterness. A sudden, loud crack sounding as Rose delivers a powerful slap, silencing the arrogant blonde maid's insults. Doana clutches her face in disbelief, trembling with rage as she glares at the defiant Countess. A sudden, loud bang sounding as Eric bursts into the room, demanding to know the cause of the noise. Doana immediately throws herself into the Count's arms, weeping and seeking protection from her supposed attacker. Feigning vulnerability, the blonde maid tells Eric that Rose suddenly lashed out and struck her without any provocation. Rose remains seated, sarcastically congratulating the Count on finally achieving his dream of becoming a father. Embracing Doana, Eric calls Rose a vicious woman and cruelly blames her for her own past miscarriage. Enraged by his heartless words, Rose stares at him with cold fury, remembering 3 years of suffering. A sudden soft thump sounding as Rose hurls a pillow at the couple, screaming for them to get out. Eric shouts back in anger, accusing Rose of stepping out of line and being completely unbelievable. Reaching her breaking point, Rose finally delivers the ultimatum, demanding an immediate divorce from the black-haired Count. Rose stands her ground, realizing she has finally manipulated the situation to force the arrogant black-haired Count into a divorce. Eric leads the weeping Doana away, cruelly ordering her to ignore the defiant woman he no longer considers his wife. Surrounded by a shimmering aura of light and flowers, the pink-haired woman calmly accepts the offer to end her miserable union. With a serene and defiant smile, Rose declares she is sick of living with a husband who pursues every woman he sees. Eric mocks her lack of options, but Rose remains unshaken, vowing to leave his suffocating household immediately and never return. A sudden splash of tea occurs as Rose's fury manifests, her internal rage bubbling over as she grips her delicate teacup. Rose reflects on her precarious situation, knowing her parents disowned her and may not welcome her back after the divorce is finalized. Thinking back to her social efforts, Rose drinks her tea while silently cursing the useless and treacherous man she married. Rose's tea spills in a sudden splash as the blonde-haired Duke unexpectedly approaches and startles her with his sudden presence. Startled by the high-ranking visitor, Rose looks up at the Duke as he questions her deep and distracted thoughts. Rose attempts to mask her distress, explaining with a faint and brave smile that she has officially left her previous household. The pink-haired woman tries to keep her composure while explaining her current homeless state to the concerned blonde-haired man. A dark haze begins to cloud Rose's vision as she struggles to maintain her consciousness before the increasingly worried Duke. Rose collapses with a heavy thud, caught in the Duke's arms as her strength finally fails under the weight of her trauma. Desperation fills the blonde-haired man's voice as he shouts for Rose to get a hold of herself, fearing she is fading. The Duke notes with alarm that Rose's body is burning hot as she remains limp and unresponsive in his arms. Fearing that someone is targeting Rose for helping him, the Duke realizes her honor will plummet if she is found in this state. Tension lines the Duke's face as he makes a silent and determined vow to ensure Rose reaches a safe haven immediately. Arriving at the Serviette estate with a quick rattle of the carriage, the Duke ignores protocol to bring Rose back to her family. The blonde-haired Duke commands his attendants to carry Rose into the residence this instant, his voice filled with urgent authority. A commotion erupts at the Serviette gates as the household staff protests the Duke's sudden and forceful entry without permission. An older pink-haired woman gathering roses is distracted by the chaotic shouting coming from the entrance of her quiet home. Looking toward the disturbance with confusion, the woman wonders what person could possibly be causing such a stir here. The Duke carries the unconscious Rose through the gate, determined to reach her family despite the protests of the surrounding soldiers. Pale and sweating, the pink-haired Rose remains deeply unconscious as she is brought into the presence of the startled older woman. The older pink-haired woman is struck with absolute horror upon recognizing the unconscious and sickly girl the Duke is carrying. The woman drops her basket with a sharp thump, roses spilling everywhere as she screams Rose's name in a panic. The woman frantically asks what happened to her Rose, while the Duke reports that she is burning with a severe fever. A man with brown hair and a beard demands to know the cause of the noise as he approaches the Duke. The stern and imposing Count Serviette appears, his presence demanding immediate respect as he faces the man carrying his daughter. Count Serviette realizes that the Duke is the one making a fuss and sees that he has brought Rose home. The blonde-haired Duke looks on with a heavy gaze, preparing to explain the circumstances that led to Rose's arrival. The Count takes his daughter in a swift motion, ordering his servants to escort the Duke inside and summon a physician. Count Serviette sits silently at his daughter's bedside, his heart heavy as he waits for any sign of her recovery. Stroking Rose's hair, the Count calls her a foolish girl for only returning after 3 years in such a wretched state. The Duke comforts the worried father with a soft tap on the shoulder, assuring him that the illness is a simple chill. Looking up with exhaustion, the brown-haired Count offers his sincere thanks to the Duke for saving his precious daughter. The blonde-haired Duke remains troubled, wondering why he was the one to personally bring Rose back to her father's estate. Recalling their meeting, the Duke mentions the impending divorce and his fear that being careless could further ruin Rose's reputation. The Count is shocked to learn that Rose was found alone and vulnerable at a salon without any attendants. The blonde-haired Duke looks intensely at the Count, emphasizing the grave reality of the situation Rose is currently facing. Facing the father, the Duke asks if the Count will truly stand by Rose regardless of the choice she makes. Sitting in the dim light, the Count reflects on the tears and disgraceful behavior he witnessed from Rose's treacherous husband. Visions of Rose's wedding day fill the air, reinforcing the Count's resolve to prioritize her happiness over his own pride. The Count declares that being a parent means supporting his child no matter what hardships they must face together. Flowers sitting in the morning sun represent a fresh start as the household waits for Rose to wake and speak. Rose's eyes open in a soft blink, her gaze slowly focusing on the familiar and comforting ceiling of her childhood room. Rose sits up with a sudden jolt as her parents cry out her name in a mixture of relief and worry. Confused and disoriented, the pink-haired woman wonders where she is and recalls collapsing while she was with the Duke. Tears stream down the older woman's face as she looks at her daughter, noting how much she resembles her childhood self. The older pink-haired woman embraces her daughter with a sudden, loud sob, frantically asking what has happened to her. Rose forces a brave smile as she hugs her mother back, determined not to let her parents worry about her. Recalling Rose's past, her parents remember how she locked herself away for a month after her previous marriage failed. Gripping the bedsheet tightly, Rose resolves that she will not allow herself to disappoint her family ever again. A sudden, soft rustle sounding as Count Serviat pulls his daughter into a protective embrace, his heart heavy with grief. Held within her father's warm arms, Rose reflects on the parents she left behind in her previous life. The older pink-haired woman begs for forgiveness as Rose breaks down, crying like a child in her father's embrace. At the palace, the blonde-haired Duke asks his attendant if the situation at the Serviat estate ended well. A sudden, sharp shout sounding as the Duke commands his men to return Rose to her family home immediately. The blonde-haired Duke shrugs off his aide's concerns regarding Rose's 3-year estrangement from her family. Looking at a bouquet of pink roses, the Duke confidently predicts that Rose's family would never turn her away. The scene shifts to a grand study where a sudden, shocked cry echoes regarding the news of Rose's divorce. The black-haired man in the blue vest laughs mockingly as he reads the divorce papers filed with the temple. Studying the documents, the black-haired man wonders why his subordinate, Cern, failed to report such a crucial development. The black-haired man's expression turns cold and sharp as his attendant reveals there is a significant complication. The dark-haired attendant reports that a scandalous rumor regarding Count Eric having a child is spreading among the servants. A sudden, loud crinkle sounding as the black-haired man crumples the paper, furious that the child isn't Rose's. The dark room feels oppressive as the truth is revealed that the child belongs to a maid named Dawana. Exploding in a sudden, sharp roar, the black-haired man orders the maid to be brought before him at once. A sudden, heavy thud sounding as an inkwell is overturned, reflecting the man's rage over Eric's disgraceful choice. Pacing in fury, the black-haired man laments how a proper match was ruined by Eric's reckless and foolish behavior. The red-haired Tercia enters the room, noting that rumors of the scandal have likely already spread across the city. A sudden, soft hush sounding as Tercia silences the man, warning him that he is becoming far too agitated. Pointing toward portraits of the men, Tercia cautions that killing the maid could destroy their reputation beyond repair. The black-haired man demands to know if they must simply watch a maid become the lady of the house. Tercia reveals her scheme to have Eric remarry into the Dykert family immediately after his divorce from Rose is final. The black-haired man's eyes widen in a sudden, sharp blink of surprise at the mention of the Dykert household. Tercia laughs behind her fan, explaining that the Dykarts are desperate enough to accept a husband with a concubine. Smirking at the clever plan, the black-haired man points at his attendant and orders an immediate letter to Marquis Dykart. A sudden, soft slide sounding as the letter is sealed, demanding the wedding occur as soon as humanly possible. Inside a lavish library, a voice questions if the letter they received is truly from the powerful Wen's family. The long-haired Belliard Dykart reviews the proposal, noting the suspicious haste with which the Wen's family is moving. Marquis Dykart sighs in frustration, feeling that the one-sided nature of the negotiation makes his stomach turn with disgust. Recalling the decline of imperial power, the Marquis realizes they must align with the noble faction to survive. A sudden, loud bang sounding as the Marquis slams the table, insulted that Eric is being dumped on them. A sudden, quick knock sounding as an attendant announces that the woman they summoned has finally been brought inside. Emily, a nervous woman with short red hair, enters the study and greets the high-ranking Dykart family. Belliard and her father observe the newcomer, marveling at how much she resembles the young lady of the house. Belliard begins her interrogation, asking Emily about her younger sister who went missing 5 years ago. Startled by the mention of her family, Emily is promised a reunion if she performs her duties well. A sudden metallic click sounding as Belliard reveals a knife, stating there is one specific condition for the deal. With a cold and steady gaze, Belliard prepares to make a drastic sacrifice to ensure their plan's absolute success. A sudden, sharp snip sounding as Belliard cuts her long hair, causing the red-haired Emily to gasp in horror. Belliard presents her new short hairstyle to her father, declaring that she and Emily now look truly identical. Looming over the terrified woman, Belliard reminds Emily that she was a slave freed from prison for this purpose. Belliard demands that Emily act as her perfect double, warning her never to let her true identity be discovered. Trembling with a sudden, soft sob, Emily closes her eyes and accepts the dangerous role she must now play. Meanwhile, the blonde-haired Doana admires herself in a mirror, deciding that a new dress is suitable for her. A sudden, sharp smack sounding as Doana throws a dress at a cowering brunette maid, ordering her to burn it. Doana sneers at the dress Rose provided, vowing to have a new one made that matches her newfound status. Expensive wedding gifts are discarded on the floor, ordered to be removed as if they were common trash. The brunette maid named Jane hesitates to throw the items away, earning a sharp scolding from an unseen mistress. Looking downcast, Jane endures cruel insults regarding her intelligence and her supposed resemblance to the departed Rose. A sudden, loud bang sounding as the door slams, leaving the distressed Jane alone with her orders to clear the room. Clutching her head in despair, Jane worries about the lady she served, mourning her sudden and silent departure. A sudden, soft rustle sounding as the dark-haired Cern enters the room, checking on the clearly shaken maid. Startled to see him, Jane quickly brushes him off and attempts to leave, stating she has too much work to do. A sudden, firm grab sounding as Cerne reaches out to stop her, desperate to speak before she can walk away. Turning back with a glare, Jane calls Serene a traitor for helping to drive Rose away just as Cedric desired. A sudden, soft slide sounding as Cern offers Jane a mysterious letter, his expression filled with unspoken regret. Jane is stunned into silence upon learning that their lady left a letter for them both before she vanished. Cern reveals the letter was a simple thank you, lamenting that he should have shared this final message with Jane sooner. Looking away in shame, Cern reflects on the depth of the betrayal he committed against the woman who trusted him. Memories of the pink-haired Rose's kindness surface, illustrating the genuine care she always showed her staff, despite their eventually divided loyalties. Cern explains that he hid the letter to protect it from being destroyed, waiting for the right moment to deliver it. Jane stares at him with watery eyes, listening as he acknowledges that she has every right to resent him for his silence. The dark-haired Cern finishes his confession, his gaze heavy with the weight of the secrets he was forced to keep. A sudden, sharp sob sounding as Jane collapses in grief, clutching the letter and wondering what her future holds without her lady. Meanwhile, the blonde Doana reclines on a sofa, growing impatient with how long the maid is taking to finish her tasks. A sudden, heavy creak sounding as the door begins to open, prompting Doana to prepare a harsh lecture for her servant. Doana's annoyance instantly vanishes when a regal red-haired woman enters the room, commanding the space with an air of authority. Looking on with sudden apprehension, Doana realizes this newcomer is a high-ranking member of the household she hasn't met before. The red-haired woman identifies Doana as the maid carrying her son's child, her expression unreadable as she observes the girl. Fearing she might be cast aside, Doana's mind races with anxiety as she confronts the woman who could destroy her plans. Doana's eyes narrow in calculation as she waits for the elder woman to reveal the true purpose of her sudden visit. A sudden metallic clack sounding as the woman drops her fan, offering a soft apology for startling the pregnant girl. A sudden warm embrace sounding as the red-haired woman pulls Doana close, surprising her with an unexpected show of affection. Eric's mother laments that her son never introduced them, explaining she felt compelled to meet her future daughter-in-law personally. Doana instantly adopts a sweet, innocent persona, embracing her new mother amidst a backdrop of blossoming roses. The scene shifts to a lavish parlor where a formal greeting is about to take place between the unlikely family members. Bowing deeply, Doana introduces herself to Eric's father, who watches the display with a stern and skeptical expression. The brown-haired father scoffs in disgust, making no effort to hide his disdain for the spectacle unfolding before him. Entering the study, the black-haired Eric demands to know what scheme his mother is cooking up this time with the maid. The mother dismisses his concerns, claiming she is merely excited for a grandchild, though Eric notes she never felt this way for Rose. Seeing the bandage on Doana's cheek, the mother asks if she was involved in some sort of violent struggle. Seizing the opportunity, Doana lies through her teeth, claiming Rose held a grudge and attacked her out of spite. Flashbacks depict Rose as a villainous figure, used by Doana to manipulate the older woman into viewing the former wife as a monster. Eric's mother is horrified by the fabricated story, falling completely for Doana's act of victimhood. Eric watches with a cold gaze, silently acknowledging that Doana is a master manipulator who has successfully ensnared his mother. The father scoffs at the mention of Rose, claiming she was always a strange girl who likely took after her mother. Drinking his tea with an air of superiority, the brown-haired man declares that Rose was only skilled at manipulating men. Dismissing the past, the father orders Eric to ignore the rumors and focus entirely on his upcoming wedding to Doana. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Eric stands up in shock upon hearing that the wedding will take place in days. The mother insists on the haste, noting they must marry before Doana's pregnancy becomes too obvious to the public eye. Doana beams with fake delight as the mother promises to provide a designer to measure her for a bridal gown. Rubbing his forehead in exhaustion, Eric wonders if his rush to divorce Rose has led him into an even deeper disaster. The parents depart with a cheerful wave, leaving the new couple alone to contemplate their rapidly approaching nuptials. A sudden, heavy thud sounding as the door closes, marking the end of the tense familial interrogation. Alone with Eric, the blonde Doana celebrates her victory, thrilled that she has already won over his influential mother. Clinging to Eric's arm with a predatory smile, Doana gloats that she has finally captured the hearts of everyone in the family. Blonde Doana clings to Eric's arm, but his indifference is clear as he dismisses the importance of their wedding. Spotting a portrait of Eric and Rose, Doana suggests removing it, her eyes filled with envy for the past. A sudden, sharp pull sounding as Eric retracts his hand, insisting he will handle the wedding portraits himself. Tensions rise as Doana scoffs at his cold attitude, her frustration mounting as she questions his lackluster wedding spirit. Their argument is interrupted when an attendant enters to announce a high-ranking visitor has arrived at the Wen's estate. Mona, a sophisticated designer from Moni Blanc, presents a wedding gown, introducing herself to the future lady of the house. Looking unimpressed, Doana listens as Mona explains she was sent by Lady Tercia to prepare their wedding outfits. Doana harshly critiques the gown, calling the chief designer's work awfully plain and unworthy of her new status. Demanding to be the center of attention, Doana insists her dress must be more dazzling than anything seen before. Mona bristles at the lowly maid's insults, barely containing her professional rage behind a forced and polite smile. With a predatory grin, Doana orders the creation of the most splendid, glittering gown imaginable for the upcoming ceremony. She wants a dress that will leave Rose's wedding attire in the shadows, marking her complete triumph over the past. A few days later, at the Serviat estate, voices wonder about the news brought from the capital in a letter. Rose wanders through the halls early in the morning, her curiosity piqued by the unusual household activity and chatter. Two attendants hesitate to share a message, worried about how the news will affect their lady's hard-won peace. Rose looks on with a calm expression, unaware of the bombshell that is about to be dropped regarding her ex-husband. The woman stares at a wedding invitation, instantly recognizing the royal crest of her former husband's powerful family. Rose maintains her composure, claiming she already knew of Eric's remarriage and holds no lingering resentment toward him. A sudden, quick snatch sounding as Rose reaches out to review the wedding invitation for herself. Rose is caught off guard by the haste of the ceremony, noting the suspiciously quick turnaround for the nuptials. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Rose's eyes widen in shock at a shocking detail within the letter. Her heart skips a beat as she discovers the bride's name on the invitation is not the blonde Doana. Elsewhere, Cedric asks Tercia if the wedding is proceeding as planned, his voice echoing through the lavish library. Fanning herself with an air of superiority, Tercia claims she has managed every detail to ensure a perfect ceremony. A man with an eye patch bursts in, warning Lord Cedric that a disaster has struck the family's reputation. He reports that Sir Cern is inquiring about a successor following the sudden and scandalous departure of Lord Gwen. The news of losing such a vital and loyal retainer leaves the man with the eye patch visibly shaken. Cedric's eyes widen in fury upon learning that Eric personally expelled the devoted Gwen from the Wen's household. A sudden, loud bang sounding as Cedric slams his cane, cursing Eric for his inability to recognize true loyalty. Cedric demands Eric's immediate presence, only for the black-haired son to enter with a defiant and bored expression. The father berates Eric for his continued failures, lamenting that he hasn't been satisfied once in 3 years. Eric dismisses the lecture with a sharp tisk, showing his utter lack of respect for his father's booming authority. Standing up in a huff, Eric demands to know why his father is causing another scene during wedding preparations. Cedric calls his son a fool, refusing to accept the petty reasons given for dismissing such a loyal servant. Cedric reflects on Gwen's 30 years of devotion, urging Eric to listen to wiser men for the family's sake. Defiant to the end, Eric declares he will marry whoever he chooses, regardless of his father's constant meddling. Cedric is disgusted by the choice of a low-born woman, but Eric insists she will soon be the countess. A sudden, sharp whistle sounding as Cedric hurls a heavy envelope at his son in a fit of rage. Cedric commands that Eric will marry Marquis Deichert's daughter, his face contorted with a cold, authoritative malice. Eric yells back, clutching the crumpled papers and asserting that he alone decides what happens in his own house. Cedric mocks Eric's doll playing, his anger reaching a breaking point as he prepares to strike the defiant boy. A sudden, heavy thud sounding as Cedric hits Eric with a heavy object, blood staining the floor. Eric staggers back, blood dripping from his forehead as his father's cruelty reaches a violent and new peak. Memories of a traumatized childhood surface as Cedric orders Eric to the basement for a brutal re-education session. Clinging to his head, Eric is haunted by the darkness of the basement and the horror it once held. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Eric realizes he must escape before he is dragged back into that nightmare. Meanwhile, Tercia looms over the terrified Emily, questioning why the girl is struggling to keep her fragile composure. A sudden, firm grab sounding as Tercia catches Emily's chin, reminding her that the high-stakes wedding is days away. Tercia threatens to make Emily and her brother vanish forever if the secret of her identity is ever revealed. With a dark and sinister smile, Tercia orders Emily to erase her past and become the perfect Belriard Deichard. Tercia blackmails the red-haired Emily, forcing her to assume the identity of Belriard Deichard to protect her brother. Pleased by the girl's submission, Tercia smiles as she prepares to mold her into the perfect high society bride. Tercia holds Emily's hands, declaring that the red-haired girl will be the true star of the upcoming wedding. At the Grand Duke Artaeum's residence, the final countdown begins for a ceremony set to take place in 2 days. Rose sits tensely in the lavish parlor, admitting she has no intention of stopping her former husband's rapid remarriage. The blonde Cedric listens intently, surprised to hear that Rose credits another woman for the sudden stability of the household. Rose reviews the documents regarding the mysterious Belriar, hoping Cedric can shed some light on the reclusive noblewoman's background. Cedric leans back wearily, noting that the Marquis of Deichard is notoriously protective of his youngest daughter's public life. Rose looks on in disbelief as Cedric admits that even his extensive influence hasn't granted him much information beyond rumors. Flashbacks illustrate the mysterious Belriar as a woman who avoids the spotlight, preferring small gatherings over large public events. Sensing a growing mystery, Rose crosses her arms and decides she must investigate the bride's identity personally. Cedric leans in close with a charming smile, his gaze lingering on Rose as the atmosphere between them softens. Rose blinks in surprise as the blonde man asks if she has any other special requests for him to fulfill. A sudden, sharp realization strikes Rose, her hand raised as she considers asking Cedric to accompany her to the wedding. The pair continue their intimate conversation on the sofa, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding at the Wenz estate. Cedric looks away with a slight blush, promising to reveal the specific details of his plans once he returns. Rose radiates confidence and joy, vowing to succeed in her endeavors to honor the trust of her investor, the Grand Duke. The long hours of planning leave Rose hilariously drained, her energy spent after the intensive strategy session with Cedric. Rose reflects on the solid progress made thanks to Gwen's help, feeling relieved that many complex problems have been solved. A sudden, quick tat-tat sounding as Rose rushes through the halls, determined to get back before it is too late. Rounding a corner, Rose nearly collides with the black-haired Cern, her eyes wide with shock at his sudden appearance. Cern reaches out to steady her, his expression one of polite concern as he asks if the lady is injured. Recovering her poise, Rose offers a warm smile and thanks Cern for his help, her mood instantly brightening. Cern offers to escort her home as an apology for the collision, his friendly demeanor easing Rose's frantic pace. As the sun sets behind the grand estate, Cern admits he was pleasantly surprised by Rose's genuine happiness to see him. Rose playfully chides him for leaving so abruptly with only a letter, though she remains glad for his company. Cern apologizes for his hasty departure, claiming grim circumstances forced his hand as he walks beside the pink-haired Rose. Rose asks if Cern and Jane are doing well, having noticed a cold distance growing between the two recently. Cern looks away guiltily, hiding the secret that he is actually a subordinate working directly for the powerful Lord Cedric. Walking together, Cern admits to Rose that he made a mistake that hurt Jane, causing a rift in their relationship. Rose listens with a look of concern as Cern explains he is patiently waiting for Jane to forgive him. A sudden, warm touch, sounding as Rose places a hand on Cern's shoulder to reassure him that everything will work out. Cern looks at Rose with silent admiration, moved by her kindness and the comfort she offers him in a difficult moment. Rose mentions her plan to see Jane at Eric's wedding, leaving Cern startled by her knowledge of the event. Rose clarifies that she bears no ill will, as she is completely indifferent to whatever her ex-husband does now. Memories of a bloody confrontation surface, depicting Eric's traumatized face as he describes the Wenz estate as a living hell. Inside the quiet library, a soothing voice tries to reassure the trembling Eric that he is finally safe from his father. Tercia gazes out the window, dismissing the father's violent outburst as a common occurrence that she can easily manage. Eric lies motionless on the bed, haunted by the memory of his father's cruelty and the physical toll it took. Gently cupping Eric's face, the red-haired Tercia apologizes for the injury to his hand, though Eric insists he was only startled. Tercia urges the black-haired boy to stay strong, reminding him not to let his father's malice break his spirit. Holding his chin firmly, Tercia declares that Eric is the pride of Count Wenz, regardless of any insults thrown his way. With a predatory grin amidst dark roses, Tercia promises to handle the Count herself, while Eric focuses on his wedding. The scene shifts to the elegant dining hall, where final arrangements for the wedding guest seating are being finalized. Cedric leans over Rose as she works, his playful attitude clashing with her serious focus on the mountain of paperwork. Rose pauses to reflect on Cedric's offer of help, her heart racing as she struggles with her growing feelings for him. Rose's thoughts drift to the betrayal she suffered, fueling a sudden, petty desire to confront and mock the blonde Dawana. Despite her wish to move on, Rose finds herself unable to fully forget the pain inflicted by Eric and his mistress. Cedric notices her distracted state, gently asking if something is bothering her as she stares blankly at her notes. Cedric correctly identifies the source of her distress as Eric's wedding day, and Rose confirms it with a somber nod. Rose reflects on her lack of feelings for Eric, admitting her desire to see Dawana with her own eyes. Cedric firmly insists that Rose must attend the wedding, leaving her momentarily stunned by his sudden decisiveness. Rose stares at Cedric in wide-eyed surprise, clearly caught off guard by the intensity of his suggestion. Cedric points out that they must hurry if they intend to stop somewhere before the wedding ceremony begins. They arrive at an opulent boutique, where a brown-haired attendant greets the Grand Duke with a deep bow. Rose is visibly awestruck by the luxury of the boutique, realizing she had no idea such a place existed. Cedric leans in to whisper a secret to Rose, causing her to look both surprised and slightly flustered. The attendants ask to prepare Rose, but she hesitantly wonders if she can truly be ready in 30 minutes. The brown-haired attendant laughs politely, explaining that a full hair and makeup transformation will take at least 2 hours. Rose is left speechless, realizing her estimated timeline for getting ready was far too tight for their standards. A sudden, sharp realization sounding as the attendants are struck by a bolt of professional inspiration to help Rose. Cedric gives a knowing nod to the lead attendant, who prepares to lead the pink-haired Rose away. Rose worries that accompanying Cedric might cause unpleasant rumors about him, but he dismisses the idea with a smile. Cedric turns the focus back to Rose, gently telling her that she is the only one he worries for. Touched by his sincerity, Rose looks down with a soft, warm expression as her heart swells with emotion. A sudden, rhythmic click-clack sounding as a pair of high heels approaches the couple in the grand hallway. Backed by a floral aura, 3 attendants pose with their tools, vowing to prepare Rose perfectly for the wedding. The attendant whisks Rose away as Cedric waves goodbye, promising to see her once her transformation is complete. The scene shifts back 12 years to the Serviat estate, providing a glimpse into the childhood of the leads. A young, blonde Cedric looks on with a stern expression, his eyes filled with a maturity beyond his years. A young Rose follows after him, clutching a flower crown and asking why she isn't allowed to stay close. Young Cedric warns her that staying near him will only cause scandalous rumors to follow her immediately. Young Rose places the flower crown on his head, simply stating that she doesn't mind the whispers at all. Radiant with kindness, young Rose explains that she just doesn't want the lonely Cedric to be all alone. In the present day, Cedric looks away thoughtfully, perhaps remembering the long-standing bond he shares with Rose. The brown-haired attendant gasps in delight, her face flushed as she admires the Grand Duke's stunning new look. Dressed in a fine gray vest and white shirt, Cedric looks absolutely perfect as he thanks the staff. The attendant informs Cedric that the lady who arrived with him is finally ready to make her appearance. Pulling back a heavy red curtain, the attendant invites Cedric to see the results of Rose's intensive makeover. Cedric is left speechless as Rose stands before him in a magnificent white gown, her long hair flowing beautifully. At the wedding venue, grand carriages arrive as the high society elite gather for the most anticipated event. Two noblewomen gossip, noting that the scale of this wedding far exceeds that of Eric's first marriage. The guests are suddenly distracted by a stir at the entrance, urging each other to look at the new arrival. Rumors spread like wildfire as Grand Duke Artyom arrives, and the crowd realizes he has a stunning companion. Rose emerges from the carriage looking like a floral vision, her identity as Rose Serviat shocking the entire guest list. The crowd is scandalized to see a divorcee attending her ex-husband's wedding on the arm of a powerful rival. Doana prepares herself, noting with a smirk that Rose's presence with the Grand Duke will certainly shake society. A sudden, sharp snap sounding as the blonde Doana breaks her pearl necklace in a fit of jealous rage. Doana is overcome with frustration, feeling like the woman who was supposed to help her has made her a fool. Sensing a presence, Doana spins around with a look of pure fury, demanding to know who has entered. Rose and Cedric walk in with calm confidence, and Rose mockingly reveals that she was invited to the wedding. Doana scoffs, accusing Rose of bringing a knight to avoid being outdone and questioning if she has regrets. Rose remains unbothered by the insults, while Doana wonders if Rose is trying to rekindle old feelings for Eric. A gloved hand extends a formal wedding invitation, questioning if Doana is certain about the ceremony's true nature. A sudden, quick snatch sounding as Doana grabs the envelope, demanding to know why Rose has a fake invitation. Doana's face pales as she stares at the document, her expression twisting into one of absolute shock and horror. Doana hurls the papers aside in a rage, accusing Rose of pulling a cruel prank on her wedding day. The discarded invitation clearly names Eric Dewens and Belliard Dicard, exposing the truth behind the impending nuptials. Rose nonchalantly suggests that Doana should check the real bride's waiting room if she thinks it's a prank. The blonde Doana stands frozen in a dark, oppressive atmosphere as the weight of Rose's words sinks in. Narrative text highlights a shabby dress and tacky jewelry as broken pearls and a document lie discarded on the floor. The narration questions why a high-ranking lady would have only one attendant when she should have had several. Panicked, the blonde Doana pushes past Cedric and Rose, shouting for them to move out of her way. Looking around frantically, Doana shouts for Eric as the devastating realization of the bride switch begins to sink in. Doana stops abruptly, her mouth open in a silent gasp as the weight of Rose's warnings finally hits her. The red-haired bride gestures for silence while she stands with Eric, watched by a stunned Doana from the shadows. Surrounded by dark roses and a jagged aura, Doana realizes with horror that Rose told the absolute truth. Doana confronts the couple, demanding to know the cause of the commotion, while Eric and the red-haired bride watch coldly. A sudden, firm padul sounding as Doana grips her dress, while the bride dismisses her as a temporary diversion. Flashbacks reveal Doana's belief that Tercia was a supportive friend who claimed the previous wife had approved the marriage. Doana collapses in despair, while the red-haired bride coolly notes that the new mistress will have much to handle. A rhythmic click-clack sounding as characters move through the grand, vaulted hallway, while the fallout of the confrontation continues. Doana's face twists in disbelief as she insists Eric would never switch the bride without her knowing. Slumped on the floor, Doana is mocked by the red-haired bride for believing in their supposed grand love. Cedric points out that a man who abandoned his wife of 3 years would easily discard a mistress too. A sudden, sharp balzac sounding as Doana snaps, screaming at Rose to shut up and stop interfering. A rhythmic giabiak sounding as Eric approaches, prompting a desperate, hopeful cry from the blonde Doana. Rose looks on with a cold, piercing gaze, her expression filled with a sudden, sharp, chikion sounding of irritation. Clinging to Eric, Doana accuses Rose of bringing a knight and spouting nonsense about the bride being switched. A sudden, smooth sirk sounding as Eric lifts Rose's chin, ignoring Dawana entirely to praise how well Rose dressed. Eric looks down with a predatory gaze, admitting that Rose's current appearance is exactly how he likes it. A sudden, light sook sounding as Eric holds Rose's hair, arrogantly suggesting they might have stayed married if she'd dressed this way. Rose scoffs at Eric's audacity, coldly questioning if he actually believes she is still pining for him. A sudden, sharp tack sounding as Cedric swats Eric's hand away, noting the visible disgust in the Count's eyes. Eric smirks, claiming he is merely offering a greeting to his former wife, despite the obvious tension in the room. Cedric warns Eric that uninvited attention is an insult, regardless of any previous relationship they once shared. A sudden, sharp umjill sounding as Eric flinches when Cedric firmly declares that Rose is not a doll for amusement. Dawana frantically pleads for Eric's attention, accusing Rose of bringing a knight and lying about the switched bride. Eric looks back at Dawana with cold indifference, stating that for him, the bride has never actually changed. Heartbroken and stunned, Dawana asks Eric how he could possibly betray her in such a cruel public manner. A sudden, desperate diok sounding as Dawana grabs Eric's arm, frantically bringing up their child as a final plea. Dawana insists the child must rightfully become the heir to the Count's house, hoping to sway Eric's cold heart. A sudden, sharp tack sounding as Eric roughly shakes Dawana off, telling her to get a hold of herself immediately. Eric berates Dawana, claiming she was never in a position to marry, and questioning what the child has to do with the wedding. Eric turns his back on the sobbing Dawana, and Rose watches the pathetic display with a look of silent contempt. Cedric watches the exchange thoughtfully, his mind focused on getting rid of Dawana so he can speak with Rose alone. A sudden, soft ahem sounding as Eric coughs awkwardly, his eyes fixed on Rose while he ignores Dawana's presence. Eric suggests they move somewhere private to talk, a sudden, playful soh sounding in the air as he disregards the chaos. A sudden, sharp jipple sounding as Rose glares at Eric, clearly disgusted by his attempt to isolate her for a conversation. Rose pulls Cedric closer and declares she has no interest in ever facing either of her tormentors ever again. A sudden, firm tiok sounding as Eric tries to stop them, frantically asking Rose where she thinks she is going. A sudden, sharp kayak sounding as Dawana tries to pull Eric back, declaring she will never let go of his hand. A rhythmic click-clack sounding as Rose and Cedric walk away, leaving the scene of Eric and Dawana's desperate struggle. Rose walks beside Cedric through the hall, wondering if it's truly all right to just leave the situation like that. Rose reflects on the meaningless nature of forced apologies as a sudden, soft sook sounding of movement follows her. In a chibi-style moment, Cedric laughs off the insults, finding it quite novel to be referred to as something lowly. A sudden, soft sounding as Rose realizes the confrontation wasn't nearly as satisfying as she had initially hoped. Memories of past betrayals blend with the present as Rose reflects on how consistently disappointing Eric and Dawana remain. The priest presides over the grand wedding as Eric stands at the altar with the red-haired bride, Lady Belliart. Eric and his new bride stand stoically at the altar, their expressions blank as the formal ceremony draws to a close. The red-haired bride looks at Eric with an unreadable expression as they stand at the altar together. A red-haired nobleman listens as guests gossip about Eric's messy relationships and the presence of his ex-wife. The red-haired madam and her companion demand immediate answers from Eric regarding the chaos surrounding the wedding ceremony. Eric stands stoically in his wedding attire, inwardly confused by the sudden and dramatic shift in his circumstances. Eric reflects on Rose's past submissiveness, shocked by how her entire demeanor has changed in an instant. A sudden, firm cuck sounding as the red-haired bride grips Eric's arm with an intense and desperate determination. The red-haired bride informs Eric that completing this marriage is a matter of extreme importance for her future. Eric and the red-haired bride look forward with cold expressions, the tension between them palpable during the ceremony. Eric pledges his vows with a serious face, finally sealing the union despite the overwhelming scandal and rumors. The scene shifts to a grand building under a bright blue sky, marking a transition in the narrative. The red-haired madam stands authoritatively at the estate, overseeing the maids as she manages the household's affairs. Madam reflects that while the wedding was messy, its completion means she has already won half the battle. Madam notes that the Count's household remains oblivious to her schemes as she prepares for the next phase. A sudden, sharp meowmchit sounding as Dawana clings to Eric, shamelessly interrupting the madam's plans for the honeymoon. Dawana cheerfully announces she is joining the trip, much to the silent, fiery frustration of the shocked red-haired madam. Rose sits by a window enjoying tea, mentioning that traveling south is beneficial for an expecting mother. Rose surprises the brown-haired Jane by suggesting they travel together as sisters rather than mistress and servant. Jane explains that despite the odd circumstances, they all ended up traveling south in the same carriage together. Rose reflects on the awkward journey where Dawana shamelessly ignored the new madam's obvious and growing irritation. A sudden, soft sigh sounding as Jane notes the unbelievably tense atmosphere currently plaguing the Count's estate. Rose offers Jane a new opportunity, suggesting she quit her current position and come work for her instead. A sudden, light kumjarak sounding as Jane fidgets, admitting she would love to accept, but has personal complications. Rose smiles warmly and rests her chin on her hands, listening intently to Jane's concerns about the offer. A sudden, firm tiak sounding as Rose places her hand on the table to address Jane's hesitation directly. Rose stands up with bold energy, surprising Jane as she prepares to explain her ambitious new future plans. Rose reveals her vision for a new business, explaining her plan to establish a grand department store. A sudden, firm tiap sounding as Cedric covers Rose's mouth, warning her against discussing confidential business so carelessly. Cedric questions if Jane is truly trustworthy enough to hear such important secrets about their upcoming business ventures. In a chibi-style moment, Jane tries to calm them down as Rose and Cedric bicker over her recruitment. A sudden, sharp meowmchit sounding as Jane asks to at least hear the general idea of the business. Rose and Cedric share a look of realization as they prepare to elaborate on the department store concept. Jane ponders the idea, worrying that she might only be capable of helping with simple, everyday tasks. Jane explains that the store will need to appeal to trendy young nobles and wealthy noble women who love spending. Rose considers the advice, realizing she doesn't currently have anyone to help her navigate high society tastes. In a chibi-style moment, Jane bluntly points out that Rose is currently out of touch with modern trends. A sudden, sharp J-Jake sounding as Cedric claps his hands together, struck by a perfect solution to their problem. Cedric confidently declares his plan to introduce Rose to the influential and trend-setting Princess Diana. Rose and Jane are left speechless, stunned by the prospect of gaining such a powerful royal ally. Rose envisioned the imperial palace, knowing a royal endorsement would define the trends for all of high society. Overjoyed, Rose praises Cedric as a genius, her excitement bubbling over as the grand plan takes shape. Cedric smiles warmly, promising to do everything in his power as an investor to ensure the business succeeds. Rose glows with excitement, feeling that just meeting the princess would be a massive honor for her. Jane watches the pair with a worried expression, her relief for Rose overshadowed by a lingering, dark suspicion. A sudden, sharp humchit sounding as Jane recalls a sinister plot Cedric once mentioned to her in passing. Dark imagery depicts a scheme to poison Princess Diana during a toast by switching her cup for a regular one. Horrified, Jane realizes that if the plan succeeds, the Duke will be arrested on the spot for the crime. Panicked, Jane rushes toward Rose and urgently asks for a moment of her time to speak privately. Rose cheerfully agrees to listen, completely unaware of the devastating warning Jane is about to deliver. Jane grips Rose's hand with desperate urgency, emphasizing that the matter she must discuss is of critical importance. Rose looks at Jane with a serious, questioning gaze as she prepares to hear the truth about the plot. Jane requests that the black-haired Cedric step outside for a moment so she can speak with Rose privately. A sudden, sharp clang sounding as a teacup shatters on the floor, splashing lemon tea everywhere. Rose trembles with terror, shocked by the discovery of a plot to harm both the princess and Cedric. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Rose stares with wide, purple eyes at the implications of the assassination plan. A sudden, firm thud sounding as Rose seizes Jane's shoulders, desperately asking who else knows the secret. Jane reassures the distraught Rose, confirming that she overheard the dangerous details while she was entirely alone. Jane looks down with a heavy heart, pleading with Rose to stop involving herself with the Duke. The memory of Cedric kneeling in despair lingers as Jane warns Rose about the dangers of her association. Rose reflects on the auction and the Tear of Luna necklace, her mind racing with Jane's urgent warnings. Rose's resolve crystallizes as she declares her desire to be known for her business success rather than her divorce. Standing among white roses, Rose feels the weight of her ambition and the necessity of the upcoming royal banquet. Jane stands in the shop, her expression determined as she thinks about the preparations for the princess. A sudden, light tap sounding as Jane informs Rose that it is finally time to close the shop. A sudden, firm grab sounding as Jane catches Rose's hands, asking for one final promise before she departs. Rose looks on with a gentle gaze as Jane vows to support her no matter what choice she makes. Jane offers a radiant, reassuring smile, telling Rose to come back safely because she will be waiting. A rhythmic clack-clack sounding as Jane walks through the night, touched by how much Rose cares for her. A sudden, soft brush sounding as a dark figure emerges from the shadows to follow Jane down the street. A sudden, firm thud sounding as a hand clamps over Jane's mouth, silencing her in the dark alleyway. Jane's hat falls to the ground as a desperate plea for her to stay safe echoes through the street. The black-haired man tells Jane to stay quiet, and she immediately recognizes the voice as belonging to Cern. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Cern releases Jane, who is visibly shaken by his sudden, forceful appearance. Jane confronts Cern with indignant anger, demanding to know if he has completely lost his mind. Jane is stunned as Serene criticizes both her and Rose for their reckless behavior in such dangerous times. Cern looks down in shame as Jane bluntly calls him a coward for hiding in the shadows for so long. Jane delivers a stern lecture, telling Cern to take responsibility and change instead of hiding his true face. Cern stands under the night sky, a single tear falling as Jane's blunt truth finally reaches him. Cern admits Jane is correct, his voice filled with regret as he faces the brown-haired woman. Cern reflects on the pain of following Cedric's orders while being forced to deceive everyone he truly loves. Cern struggles with his words, his expression solemn as he stands on the moonlit path with Jane. Cern reveals his inner turmoil, confessing that he feared being abandoned by his only remaining family. A flashback from 10 years ago begins with a young child calling out desperately for their mother. A young, black-haired Cern joyfully returns home, holding a bouquet of wildflowers for his sick mother. A sudden, light patter sounding as young Cerny enters his mother's room to present his cheerful gift. Cern remembers their simple happiness together before his mother's health began to fade in their small home. A sudden, soft thud sounding as the memory of his mother coughing up blood signals a tragic end. A sudden, sharp whoosh sounding as rain drenches young Cernay while he kneels alone at a fresh grave. A sudden, light splash sounding as a tall man in a black coat and top hat approaches him. The man in the top hat questions if Cern is Rebecca's child while holding a formal letter. The man coldly notes the resemblance between Cern and his mother, showing no empathy for the boy's grief. Cern recalls that seeing his father felt like finding a final lifeline rather than feeling any bitterness. Cern pleads with the man not to leave him, desperate for any sense of belonging in the world. A sudden, firm grab sounding as young Sorn seizes his father's coat, begging to be taken in. The intense fear of being left alone made the young Serene desperate for any connection to his family. A silver hair. Back in the present, Jane is horrified and moved by the tragic history Cerny has finally shared. A sudden, light squeeze sounding as Cern takes Jane's hands, wanting to be honest with those he loves. Cern pledges to protect Jane, his heart finally open as he stands with her in the night. A sudden, light snicker sounding as Jane laughs softly, the heavy weight between them finally lifting. The scene ends with a view of the house under the night sky as they decide to go home. From a high vantage point, the purple-haired Rose and blue-haired Cedric walk together across the quiet courtyard. Looking down from the balcony, the brown-haired nanny and red-haired lady criticize the behavior of those below. The red-haired lady smiles gently, suggesting the nanny grant the servants a little more room to breathe. The lady's calm expression falters as the nanny addresses her with a sudden, sharp, and cold sternness. The nanny lectures the lady, claiming servants only act disrespectfully because they do not truly respect her. A memory of the wedding surfaces, highlighting the dark-haired count's cold and distant absence since that day. The nanny reminds the lady that the blonde Dawana has constantly sabotaged her every small opportunity. Two servants whisper in secret, while the brown-haired nanny observes the crumbling hierarchy of the noble household. The nanny warns that the count's lack of love brings shame to the entire Marquis family name. A sudden, sharp piet sounding as the red-haired lady protests, desperately insisting that she is doing her best. The nanny sighs in frustration, noting how the blonde Duana continues to interfere with their private affairs. The nanny pressures the lady to assert her status or seek help to handle the situation permanently. Horrified by the suggestion of violence, the red-haired lady begs to avoid any unnecessary and cruel killing. The nanny backs down temporarily, but she firmly warns the lady to listen carefully to her strategic advice. Dark thoughts swirl as the nanny warns that a hardened heart is required to see her sister again. The red-haired lady trembles in fear, trapped under the nanny's oppressive, dark, and calculating gaze. A sudden, light basak sounding as the blonde-haired Dawana calls out for the count in the garden. A sudden, light duribian sounding as Dawana searches the grounds, certain the count is nearby. Dawana discovers the dark-haired count having tea with the red-haired lady under a large leafy tree. A sudden, soft ho-rock sounding as the lady happily discusses her desire for another trip south. Dawana gasps mockingly, warning the lady about the risk of a miscarriage if she dares to overexert herself. A sudden, firm jabak sounding as the red-haired lady approaches Dawana with a sharp, dangerous gaze. The red-haired lady confronts the maid, accusing Dawana of wishing for her to suffer a tragic miscarriage. A sudden, light du-ruk sounding as the lady asserts her child's noble status despite her own background. The red-haired lady declares she only tolerated Dawana's disrespect out of mercy, not because it was earned. Gripping her dress, the lady expresses her deep hope that Dawana would finally learn some basic decency. A sudden, sharp badul sounding as the enraged Dawana claims the position of countess should be hers. A sudden, soft humph sounding as the dark-haired Eric sighs, clearly exhausted by the women's constant bickering. Eric reflects on his weariness, longing for a peaceful life away from the women's incessant and loud arguing. A vision of the pink-haired Rose appears among flowers, serving as a reminder of his true desires. Dawana demands Eric make his stance clear as he remains seated at the white tea table. A sudden, firm deruk sounding as Eric slams his hands down, ordering both women to stop immediately. Eric warns Dawana to be careful, agreeing that the lady's warning to her was not entirely wrong. Leaving the garden in frustration, Eric walks away while the two women continue their bitter confrontation. A sudden, sharp quick sounding as the seething Dawana blames the lady for Eric's cold, sudden departure. A sudden, sharp chua sounding as the red-haired lady pours hot tea over Dawana's blonde head. Drenched and humiliated, Dawana is told to remember this moment well by the stone-faced red-haired lady. A sudden, sharp jengarong sounding as a shattered teacup emphasizes the lady's final icy warning to Dawana. A sudden, sharp keek sounding as Eric enters a dimly lit room, his posture heavy with defeat. A sudden, soft pussy-yok sounding as Eric sits by a wedding portrait, lamenting the surrounding endless chaos. Eric wonders when everything truly began to fall apart, his mind wandering back to a better time. A memory of the pink-haired Rose laughing brightly fills Eric with a sense of lost warmth and light. Eric recalls walking beneath cherry blossoms with Rose, her vibrant energy a sharp contrast to his present. A sudden, soft hum sounding as Eric asks Rose if she truly enjoys their quiet time together. A sudden, light umjil sounding as Rose turns to Eric, her eyes wide with joyful and sincere surprise. Rose beams with pure happiness, confessing that she is simply delighted to be by Eric's side. A sudden, sharp whick sounding as Eric looks at Rose, stunned by her unconditional and deep affection. Rose gently reaches out and takes Eric's hand, urging him to come away with her. Led through the falling blossoms, Eric realizes that Rose's eyes have always been fixed solely on him. Rose asks Eric to remember the eternal vow they shared on the happy day of their wedding. Rose makes a silent, heartfelt pledge to walk by Eric's side no matter what the future holds. Their eternal commitment is sealed as they stand together amidst a flurry of falling pink flower petals. Dark, oppressive memories of his father's harsh judgment cause the dark-haired Eric to flinch in sudden pain. Eric's cynicism remains deep as he predicts Rose will eventually divorce him once his political value fades. Rose rejects his cold assumptions with a sharp refusal, her expression filled with sadness under the cherry blossoms. Choosing hope over despair, Rose urges Eric to simply focus on the joy of their current happy moment. In the present, Eric sighs heavily as he recalls her empty promises of never leaving his side. Eric sits alone in the dim light, sulking as he stares at their radiant wedding portrait from years ago. A sudden, sharp tack-tack-tack sounding as Eric storms through the hall, arrogantly declaring that Rose still belongs to him. Eric commands a servant to prepare his carriage immediately, refusing to believe Rose could ever truly walk away. Dismissing his own cruelty, Eric assumes Rose is merely sulking because he has been cold to her lately. Eric prepares to depart for the Serviat estate, determined to bring his wife back home by any means. A sudden, sharp sakduk sounding as Rose cuts a blossom, her peaceful gardening interrupted by a servant's message. Visibly annoyed, Rose demands to know the identity of the unwelcome visitor who has arrived at her home. A sudden, light tack-tack-tack sounding as Rose marches through the house, frustrated by the lack of privacy. A sudden, loud quang sounding as Rose bursts through the doors, finding her ex-husband Eric waiting inside. Eric complains about the estate's atmosphere, while Rose seethes at his audacity for visiting after their divorce. Eric nonchalantly shrugs off her fury, acting as if his presence is a natural and expected occurrence. Rose is speechless with indignation, pointing an accusing finger as she confronts Eric's absolute lack of shame. Eric offers a mocking invitation to bed, suggesting that Rose should stop pretending and return to him. Recoiling in absolute disgust, Rose grips her dress as she physically rejects his repulsive and arrogant demands. Eric treats his proposal as a rare gift, telling Rose to stop playing hard to get and accept it. A sudden, sharp utak sounding as Rose freezes in shock, appalled by the depth of Eric's delusion. Eric continues to lecture her, convinced that her anger is merely a show to gain his personal attention. A sudden, sharp puck sounding as Rose looms over the seated Eric, her patience finally reaching its breaking point. Eric smiles with a predatory confidence, certain that he can still control Rose with a single touch. He believes Rose is secretly thrilled by his presence, completely misreading her silence as suppressed desire. A sudden, heavy thwack sounding as a blow lands, forcefully silencing Eric's arrogant and entitled internal monologue. Rose berates Eric for his despicable behavior, mocking the idea that she would ever follow him again. Stunned and humiliated, Eric clutches his red, slapped cheek while struggling to process her violent rejection. Eric's face contorts with entitled rage, demanding to know why she remains unfazed by his personal mercy. A sudden, sharp bullsuck sounding as a gloved hand appears, interrupting the former couple's heated confrontation. Eric offers a conditional return, promising to make Rose the Countess again if she raises Doanna's child. He dismisses the tragedy of Rose's miscarriage as a mere inconvenience that complicated his personal affairs. A sudden, firm ku-uk sounding as Rose clenches her fist, horrified that he expects her to mother his mistress's child. A sudden, loud bang sounding as a gunshot rings out, cutting off Eric's self-centered and cruel boasting. Terrified and pale, Eric stares at the fresh bullet hole in the wall, wondering who dared to fire. A sudden, heavy jobiak sounding as a man's feet stride across the floor, signaling a new challenger's arrival. Rose's father stands in the doorway holding a rifle, having lost all tolerance for Eric's insults. A sudden, sharp bielrik sounding as the father roars at Eric to get out of his house immediately. Eric is violently ejected from the home, the heavy doors slamming shut as the family rejects him. A sudden, heavy jobiak sounding as Eric storms away, fuming that he was kicked out by his former in-laws. A sudden, light cholpuk sounding as Eric drops his cloak, his ego deeply bruised by the violent encounter. Eric barks orders at a maid, demanding she warn the Lady Belliart to be ready for his visit. His face twisted in a sinister scowl, Eric vows to make Rose crawl back to him in jealousy. The dark promise of her eventual ruin hangs in the air as Eric's obsessive thoughts continue to swirl. Servants whisper in the hallways, gossiping about the disastrous wedding night and the plight of the new mistress. A sudden, soft hue eum, sounding as a brown-haired soldier, reflects on the scandalous rumors surrounding the blonde Doanna. He recalls an intimate encounter with Doanna, realizing the chaotic state of the household is a perfect opportunity. Humming to himself, the soldier walks away, deciding it is time to pay Doanna a long overdue and secret visit. The blonde-haired Doanna touches her face in frustration, expressing her intense annoyance at the day's stressful events. Looking in a hand mirror, Doanna blames Rose for her troubles and complains about her makeup's failing coverage. In a vision, Doanna reflects on how separating Eric from the red-haired Belliard was a successful first move. Doanna worries about Eric's recent cold behavior toward her, fearing her control over him is starting to slip. Lying down, Doanna frets over a scar on her face, her thoughts suddenly interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Opening the door with a start, Doanna demands to know who would dare disturb her at this hour. The brown-haired knight in the red uniform greets Doanna mockingly, leaving her completely stunned and pale with shock. Doana furiously demands to know what the knight thinks he's doing by barging into her room unannounced like this. Gesturing dismissively, Doana reminds the knight that she previously stated they had no more business with each other. The knight leans in with a sly grin, claiming he brought news about Eric visiting the new mistress's room. Doana reacts with disbelief and horror, unable to accept that Eric might be with another woman so soon. A vision of Eric and Belliard together fills Doana with jealous rage as she realizes her rival's quick success. Screaming in a fit of rage, Doana vows to deal with them immediately, while the knight tries to calm her. The knight mentions Belliard's protective nanny, but the enraged Doana dismisses the woman's presence as completely pathetic and irrelevant. The brown-haired man laughs off her anger, telling Doana that she is simply talking nonsense in her current state. The knight warns Doana that the count is watching her and questions if her life will remain safe. Holding Doana close, the knight suggests they focus on preventing Belliard from getting pregnant while enjoying their own time. Doana sighs in frustration, realizing she must find a different and more effective way to secure her future. Accepting his presence, Doana tells the knight to come in as the door shuts behind them. The brown-haired knight climbs onto the bed, looming over Doana as their secret and treacherous affair resumes. Doana smiles up at the knight, admitting to herself that his face is actually quite pleasant to look at. The knight arrogantly suggests that Doana deserves a better man and offers himself as the superior choice. Lying back, Doana asks the knight why he is so obsessed with the count despite their current intimate situation. A sudden, soft juck sounding as Doana considers the man an idiot, her true loyalty remaining solely with herself. Doana reflects on Eric's wealth and status, realizing those are the only things she truly values about their relationship. Dark thoughts swirl as Doana concludes that she can still make very good use of the knight for her plans. Telling the knight to stop talking and focus on their encounter, Doana remains focused on her immediate desires. Surrounded by dark flowers, Doana smiles maliciously, confident that she will be the one who gets the last laugh. Waking up the next morning, Doana feels a strange warmth and wonders why she feels so comfortable today. Doana realizes the brown-haired knight is still in her bed, holding her close as he sleeps soundly beside her. A sudden, heavy thud sounding outside the window shatters the morning silence and startles the sleeping pair. The shirtless knight rubs his head in confusion, complaining about the loud noise disturbing them so early in the morning. A sudden, sharp peak sounding as Doana hits the knight with a pillow, panicking that someone might see him. Doana freezes as she hears a faint meow coming from somewhere within the room, deepening her sudden alarm. They both acknowledge the sound, and a flustered Doana urgently tells the knight to hurry up and get out. Hearing more rustling, Doana looks toward the red cloth on the floor, wondering what is making the strange noise. Haunted by her past as a maid, Doana fears another trick is being played on her and refuses to ignore it. Something moves beneath the red fabric on the floor, drawing Doana's intense, wary, and focused attention. A small white cat leaps out from under the red cloth, catching the startled Doana completely by surprise. Doana stares in shock at the tiny white kitten, realizing that the source of the noise was just an animal. While the knight questions if they can keep it, Doana decides she will raise the cat herself regardless of rules. Doana feels a sense of relief, realizing she got herself worked up over nothing but a harmless little cat. Smiling softly as she cradles the kitten, Doana decides its arrival is perfect timing to cure her growing boredom. Looking at the white cat, Doana decides to name her new companion Hyung as the kitten meows softly. The scene shifts to the Grand Duke's residence, where massive stacks of books clutter a grand sunlit room. The blonde-haired Grand Duke lies on a sofa, covered in documents as he rests in the quiet atmosphere. A knock at the door causes the Grand Duke to look up from his rest in the Grand Hall. A red-haired man enters with a large dog, announcing that an urgent letter from Serviette has just arrived. Sitting up with a start, the Grand Duke reacts with intense surprise at the mention of the unexpected letter. The blonde-haired Grand Duke begins reading the urgent message while his loyal golden dog watches him with curiosity. The blonde Grand Duke holds formal letters, noting that Rose's correspondence remains strictly professional and focused on business. Naren, the red-haired knight, questions the Grand Duke's excessive preoccupation with the Serviette family's recent business matters. In a vision, the blonde Duke playfully stops Rose from discussing business during their previous and more lighthearted encounter. Holding Rose's latest letters, the blonde Grand Duke admits that her project is truly all he has been considering. As the golden dog pulls on the documents, the Grand Duke vows to hide his obvious interest more effectively. Nurin insists that the true priority must remain on finding the missing necklace instead of focusing on Rose's letters. A sudden, sharp realization strikes Nurin as he reacts with visible alarm to the Grand Duke's nonchalant and dismissive attitude. Deep in thought, the blonde Grand Duke rests his chin on his hand while contemplating the next investigative steps. A sudden, firm gadget sounding as the Grand Duke crushes the document, declaring the current situation completely unavoidable. A sudden, soft tuck sounding as the crumpled paper hits the floor, signifying the end of their tense discussion. Naren suggests increasing the number of searchers to expedite the recovery of the precious and missing magical item. Information reveals the Tear of Luna gem can tame demonic beasts, making its discovery a dangerous and urgent priority. A haughty man directs his forces toward the Felice family, suspecting they used a demonic beast at the banquet. A sudden, light sel-ook sounding as the blonde duke relaxes on the sofa with his dog while reading documents. Smiling warmly at his loyal dog, the Grand Duke instructs Nuran to prepare a guest room for an arrival. A sudden, sharp tack sounding as a glass is slammed onto the table, reflecting the father's growing, explosive rage. Rose's bearded father fumes about Eric's despicable treatment of his daughter while his wife tries to soothe his anger. A sudden, heavy ju-ru-rook sounding as Rose sits in a gloomy atmosphere, blaming herself for Eric's sudden appearance. A sudden, wary hilcum sounding as the bearded father notices Rose's distress and asks why she looks so troubled. Rose's eyes widen in surprise as she realizes her parents' primary concern is her own personal safety and happiness. A memory of Eric's wedding surfaces, reminding Rose of the public humiliation and emotional pain she previously endured. Rose reassures her mother that she no longer harbors any romantic feelings or lingering attachment to the malicious Eric. Rose's mother expresses relief, but fears Eric will continue to harass them since they cannot simply vanish away. Leaning in close, the bearded father whispers a secret and unexpected proposal that leaves Rose completely stunned and speechless. A sudden, thunderous be-reak sounding as the news of the Grand Duke's residency invitation sends shockwaves through the room. Rose's mother argues that living together without marriage is scandalous and would surely ruin her daughter's social reputation. The bearded father weighs the threat of Duke Felice's involvement against the protection offered by the Grand Duke's home. He concludes that the Grand Duke is trustworthy, and staying with him is safer than losing his precious daughter. Turning to his daughter, the father emphasizes that the final decision to move belongs entirely and solely to Rose. A sudden, firm ju-uk sounding as Rose considers her mother's concerns while gritting her teeth in deep thought. Visions of banquet poisonings and family danger convince Rose that staying at the Grand Duke's residence is necessary. A sudden, steady der-rer-ruk sounding as Rose places her hand on the table, finalizing her resolute and difficult choice. Rose confirms she will go to the Grand Duke's residence, despite her father's offer to not force her. Offering a cheerful thumbs up, Rose promises her mother she will find another way to solve things while there. Rose's inner thoughts reveal her confidence is a facade, as the idea of staying there is still quite uncomfortable. Standing together amidst blooming roses, the blonde Grand Duke and Rose face each other, wondering about their future. The red-haired noblewoman thanks guests for attending a wedding while hosting a grand tea party in the hall. Guests compare the magnificent wedding to a royal event while gossiping about the family's new and prestigious social standing. A sudden, soft dull-cock sounding as the red-haired noblewoman sets her teacup down to make a formal introduction. The noblewoman introduces the brown-haired Marchioness Dykard as the newest and most important member of their noble family. A sudden, polite cuck sounding as Marchioness Dykard bows gracefully to the impressed group of gathered noble ladies. A sudden, quiet sogun sounding as the ladies whisper about how marriage remains the strongest alliance between families. Smiling brightly, the red-haired noblewoman announces a special and expensive gift from Marchioness Dykard to all the ladies. A luxurious brown handbag from the rare Ermea collection is unveiled as the special gift for the tea party. The ladies react with delight and shock, marveling at the rarity of the precious and authentic designer handbags presented. Marchioness Dykard watches with a modest smile, telling the ladies not to feel pressured by the expensive gesture. The noblewomen pledge their help in return, officially welcoming Marchioness Dykard into their exclusive and powerful social circle. A sudden, sly, sick sounding as the red-haired noblewoman smirks, privately mocking the ladies for being such fools. A sudden, quick sounding as the blonde duana plays with a ribbon. mockingly noting her kitten's affection. A sudden, rhythmic tadak sounding as Dawana pets her white cat, enjoying the creature's loyalty and undivided attention. The brown-haired maid enters Dona's room, announcing that the former lady of the house has come for a visit. A look of intense suspicion and anger crosses blonde Dawana's face as she hears that the former lady has returned. Memories of a past wedding resurface, reminding Dawana of how the red-haired woman previously humiliated her with false kindness. Holding her white cat Hayoung, blonde Dawana skeptically questions the maid about the numerous gifts the visitors supposedly brought. Dawana remains wary, her eyes narrowing as she contemplates the red-haired woman's true and likely malicious intentions for visiting. Seated amidst blooming roses, the red-haired noblewoman beckons Dawana with a warm, yet seemingly artificial and calculating maternal smile. A sudden, rhythmic tack-tack sounding as the red-haired woman pats the sofa, inviting blonde Dawana to sit beside her. The red-haired noblewoman feigns concern, asking if Dawana is still harboring resentment over the events of the wedding day. Blonde Dawana maintains a cold facade, crossing her arms while pretending to be unaware of the woman's specific meaning. A sudden, light umjil sounding as Dawana suggests that any lingering tension must simply be the result of a misunderstanding. The red-haired woman internally fumes, realizing that Dawana is a cunning opponent who is playing her own deceptive game. A sudden, sharp pat sounding as blonde Dawana snaps, accusing the woman of thinking she is a complete fool. A sudden, quick bulsuk sounding as the red-haired woman presents a blue gift box to divert Dawana's growing anger. Urging Dawana to soften her expression, the red-haired noblewoman encourages her to open the first of her many gifts. A sudden, soft busu ruk sounding as blonde Dawana opens the gift, hoping the woman's apology is genuine and generous. Confusion washes over Dawana as she stares into the box, unable to immediately process the nature of the gift. Finding only baby shoes and a teddy bear, Dawana feels insulted that she received useless junk instead of valuables. A sudden, soft pick sounding as the red-haired woman chuckles, noticing Dawana's visible disappointment with the initial offering. The noblewoman then presents a luxurious brown handbag, claiming it is a much more appropriate gift for Dawana's status. A sudden, heavy kultuk sounding as blonde Dawana swallows hard, mesmerized by the high-quality handbag she now holds. Dawana envisions herself as the envy of other noble ladies, dazzled by the handbag's extravagant and very shiny appearance. A sudden, soft keek sounding as a short red-haired girl enters, asking her mother if she was called for. A sudden, sharp tuck sounding as the red-haired mother introduces the new bride, leaving Dawana completely speechless and stunned. Dawana glares at the pair, convinced that these two sly foxes are plotting something against her behind their smiles. A sudden, light kahum sounding as the mother attempts to smooth things over, blaming their conflict on a misunderstanding. A sudden, firm juk sounding as the mother mocks Dawana, claiming she mistakenly thought the previous wedding was her own. Forcing a bright smile, blonde Dawana insists the past should remain buried as she struggles to hide her rage. A sudden, soft hum sounding as the short red-haired girl watches the exchange with a thoughtful and quiet intensity. A sudden, sharp bell tuck sounding as blonde Dawana shouts to stop the woman from mentioning her previous wedding dress. The red-haired mother and daughter sit together, their presence a unified and silent challenge to Doyana's current position. Claiming she feels unwell due to her pregnancy, blonde Dawana makes a hasty and tense exit from the room. A sudden, sharp kung sounding as the door slams shut, while Dawana demands that all gifts be sent upstairs. Fuming with rage, blonde Dawana realizes she must control her temper to avoid offending the powerful former lady. Clutching the brown handbag, Dawana decides that the luxury item is the only reason she endured the humiliating encounter. Dawana's expression shifts to shock as she inspects the bag more closely, noticing something is terribly wrong with it. A sudden, firm quack sounding as Dawana's grip tightens on the handbag, her anger reaching a new boiling point. Realizing the bag is a cheap fake, blonde Dawana vows that the red-haired woman will regret this ultimate insult. A sudden, sharp pat sounding as the counterfeit handbag is slammed onto the table in a fit of fury. Clutching her head in frustration, blonde Dawana is left completely speechless by the depth of the woman's trickery. The brown-haired maid expresses concern, suggesting it was unwise to abandon the former lady in such a manner. A sudden, loud "jack" sounding as Dawana demands silence, her patience for the maid's unsolicited advice completely exhausted. A sudden, sharp "quack" sounding as blonde Dawana seizes the maid's collar, reminding her of their new social distance. Glaring with intense hatred, Dawana tells the trembling maid to listen carefully to her next and final warning. Dawana envisions herself as the powerful mother of the next count, asserting her dominance over her current household rivals. She reminds the terrified maid that they are no longer equals, and that her status has changed for good. A sudden, light tuck sounding as blonde Dawana releases her, promising revenge on anyone who dares to challenge her. The scene shifts to a grand mansion, where the atmosphere feels unusually quiet and heavy with unanswered questions. Pacing nervously, the pinkish brown-haired lady wonders why she hasn't received any word from Grand Duke Artyom regarding Rose. A sudden, quick ta-dot sounding as a manservant rushes toward the lady, calling out to her with great urgency. Gasping for breath, the manservant announces that an unexpected visitor has just arrived at the estate's front door. The blonde Grand Duke Artyom offers a polite bow, apologizing to Rose's mother for his sudden visit. In the grand hall, the pink-haired mother graciously accepts his apology, acknowledging the urgency of the situation. A handwritten letter expresses her sincere gratitude to the Grand Duke for personally coming to escort them. Beaming with joy, the pink-haired mother clasps her hands while promising to tell Rose to get ready. Artyom maintains a subtle and seemingly satisfied smile as his plan for the family's relocation proceeds smoothly. The mother is visibly stunned when the Grand Duke unexpectedly requests that she accompany them as well. A sudden, rhythmic thud sounding as the carriage waits to transport the three family members to the estate. Inside the carriage, Rose's parents share a tense and nervous glance as they begin their unexpected journey. Across from them, the blonde Artyom remains calm, while the long pink-haired Rose stares ahead with a serious expression. The close quarters of the carriage create an incredibly heavy and awkward atmosphere for everyone involved. A sudden, light cough sounding as the bearded Damon clears his throat, still feeling skeptical of the Duke. Damon questions the reason for their accompaniment while Rose watches her father's confrontation with quiet intensity. Hand over his heart, Artyom explains he wants the parents to verify Rose's safety for themselves. The Grand Duke adds that the trip will provide a rare opportunity for peaceful family bonding. Rose looks up at Artyom with wide, surprised eyes, seemingly moved by his unexpected and thoughtful gesture. Damon narrows his eyes in deep suspicion, carefully scrutinizing the Grand Duke's every word and movement. He observes how the blonde man's stern expression softens significantly whenever he is close to Rose. A sudden, sharp realization strikes the parents as they wonder if the Grand Duke harbors secret romantic feelings. Rivera dismisses the thought as impossible, yet she remains wary of any hidden intentions behind the Duke's kindness. Determined to uncover the truth, Rivera prepares to watch the Duke closely to protect her precious daughter. Rose noticed her father is visibly sweating and asks with genuine concern if he is feeling all right. Artyom suggests the parents rest for a moment while he personally shows Rose to her new room. A sudden, soft sigh sounding as Rivera relaxes, impressed by the Duke's flawless and meticulous preparations. Turning back toward his wife, Damon calls out Rivera's name to pull her back into their private conversation. A sudden, firm squeeze sounding as Rivera clenches her hands, her maternal anxiety refusing to fully subside. Damon expresses his lingering fear that Rose, who has been hurt before, might suffer again in this house. A sudden, quiet groan sounding as Damon acknowledges that Rivera is still shaken by Eric's past actions. Despite trusting the Duke's reputation, the protective father remains worried about the path Rose is choosing. Watching them walk away, Damon reflects on how even the smartest girls become helpless when love is involved. A sudden, light exhale sounding as Rivera sighs, worrying that Rose's intelligence is no match for romantic feelings. Damon leans in to plant a sudden, tender peck on Rivera's cheek, catching her completely off guard. A sudden, warm glow sounding as Damon teases his blushing wife about where Rose inherited her helplessness. Surrounded by golden roses, the parents decide to place their trust in Rose's judgment once more. Rose offers a gentle smile, reflecting on the unconditional support and trust her parents have provided. The scene shifts to the estate grounds, where the bright sky frames the lush and tranquil greenery. After her parents depart, Rose finds a moment of quiet peace petting her loyal golden dog, Finn. A sudden, wet lick sounding as Finn showers Rose with affection while she rests on a bench. A sudden, soft pat sounding as a hand strokes the happy dog's head during their playful interaction. Rose tells Finn to behave while she heads toward the water for a quick wash. A sudden, happy whimper sounding as Rose smiles at Finn, feeling as though the dog truly understands her. Walking through the dense and lush garden, Rose approaches a secluded pond hidden within the estate. Kneeling by the shimmering blue water, Rose prepares to wash her face before the Grand Duke returns. A sudden, sharp rustle sounding as a heavy hoof steps onto the grass, alerting Rose to a presence. Rose turns in shock as a massive, dark silhouette looms over her by the edge of the pond. Her eyes widen as she comes face to face with a majestic black horse sporting a single long horn. Stunned by the mythical sight, Rose can hardly believe she is looking at a legendary black unicorn. A sudden, strange tingle sounding as Rose reaches out to the red-eyed creature, drawn by a mysterious feeling. A sudden, soft touch sounding as Rose gently strokes the unicorn's face, finding the unfamiliar sensation mesmerizing. A sudden, frantic shout sounding as Artyom and Finn rush forward, demanding that Rose step away immediately. Artyom warns that the creature is a dangerous monster, while Rose remains frozen in her encounter with the unicorn. Rose stares in disbelief at the majestic black unicorn, her mind racing with the terrifying thought of monsters. Puzzled by the creature's stillness, Rose wonders why such a supposedly dangerous beast hasn't made a single move. Artyom's frantic command echoes as the loyal Finn leaps forward, desperate to protect Rose from the looming threat. Rose desperately calls for everyone to stop, but her footing fails, sending her tumbling toward the shimmering water. A sudden, loud splash sounding as Rose's name is shouted in terror, the water erupting around her sudden fall. Artyom and Finn rush to the bank as Rose gasps for air, his voice thick with urgent, panicked concern. The golden Finn and the red-eyed unicorn share a tense, silent standoff while Rose struggles in the water. Clutching her chest, Rose fears that the escalating confrontation will lead to someone being seriously and needlessly hurt. Reaching out, Rose feels a strange connection as both beasts suddenly pause, their aggressive energy replaced by glowing obedience. A sudden, heavy silence sounding as the two powerful creatures stand perfectly still by the edge of the pond. Artyom watches in absolute shock, unable to comprehend how Rose managed to calm both Finn and the mythical monster. His eyes widen in disbelief as he realizes the sheer impossibility of the calm that has settled over the garden. Artyom quickly pulls the shivering Rose from the water, accepting her sheepish apology for the sudden, panicked accident. Supporting her gently, the blonde Grand Duke leads Rose away, his protective nature overriding his initial frustration and worry. He scolds her lightly for her reckless behavior, yet Rose offers a playful smile, relieved that everyone is safe. A sudden, soft whine sounding as Finn watches them leave, while Rose reflects on the strange bond she felt. Artyom recalls Finn's nature as a fierce, disobedient beast of monster blood, marveling at the dog's absolute submission. A sudden, sharp sneeze sounding as Artyom realizes Rose has influenced both beasts to an incredible and mysterious degree. Draping his coat over her shoulders, Artyom insists they had inside to prevent her from catching a serious cold. Rose is caught off guard as Artyom suddenly sweeps her into his arms, ignoring her protests of being fine. He teases her about her parents' potential reaction, while Rose inwardly grumbles about being treated like a helpless child. The tranquil garden falls silent as they retreat, leaving behind only the lingering mystery of the unicorn's strange behavior. A sudden, loud sneeze sounding as Rose sits wrapped in a thick blanket, her body shivering from the chill. Hiding her face in her hands, she feels a wave of embarrassment for showing such a disheveled side to everyone. A sudden, light tap sounding as a warm cup is placed before her, the steam rising in the air. Rose thanks him for his thoughtfulness, while Artyom explains that hot water is being prepared for her bath. As she sips the warm tea, Rose notices Artyom's intense gaze fixed on her, making her feel slightly self-conscious. A sudden, quiet hum sounding as Rose feels the weight of his eyes, wondering what thoughts are crossing his mind. Breaking the silence, Rose asks if he has something on his mind, sensing his unspoken questions and lingering concern. Artyom admits his worry, his voice softening as he confesses he was only afraid she might have been injured. A sudden, crackling burn, sounding as Rose explains that the monster never actually attacked her before her accidental slip. She questions his extreme urgency, noting that despite its size, the unicorn didn't seem truly dangerous or threatening. Artyom explains the terrifying truth about high-level monsters that take beautiful forms just to feed on human souls. A sudden, soft gasp sounding as Rose realizes the true depth of the danger she unknowingly faced in the garden. Silence hangs between them as Artyom hesitates, clearly wrestling with the question that has been weighing heavily on him. He finally asks Rose if she possesses the legendary tear of Luna, his expression intense and searching for the truth. Rose is completely taken aback by the sudden inquiry, her eyes widening at the mention of the powerful gemstone. He elaborates that monsters often react to such rare gems, which would explain the unicorn's strange and sudden obedience. Rose admits that while the monster was unusual, she has no knowledge of holding such an incredible and powerful item. She jokes that if she owned the Tear of Luna, she wouldn't be seeking his financial investment for her business. Artyom remains skeptical, his mind racing as he tries to connect the dots between her knowledge and her power. He reflects on how she correctly identified the fake gem at the auction and controlled the high-level monster today. A sudden, light brush sounding as his hand moves toward her, drawn by an impulse he cannot quite explain. A sudden, warm glow sounding as Artyom cups her face, causing Rose's heart to race as her cheeks flush. Their eyes meet in a charged, silent moment, the distance between them shrinking as Rose remains frozen in shock. Realizing his actions, Artyom quickly pulls away, his composure cracking as he tries to mask his sudden, intense embarrassment. A sudden, awkward cough sounding as he stands up, struggling to regain his dignity after the intimate and impulsive gesture. Urging her to rest, he makes a hasty exit, leaving a stunned Rose to wonder about his true feelings. A sudden, heavy sigh sounding as Artyom stands in the hallway, his heart still racing from their brief encounter. He clutches his head in frustration, lamenting his inability to control his impulses when he is around her. The red-haired aide asks Artyom if something happened inside, noticing his uncharacteristic lack of composure. Artyom dismisses the concern, while the suspicious aide remains unconvinced by his master's sudden avoidance. Presenting a list of Rose's recent contacts, the aide follows Artyom's orders to track her movements. The report confirms Count Eric's silence and Rose's regular meetings with her trusted maid, Jane. Artyom's eyes narrow as he flips through the pages, stopping at an unexpected name on the list. He questions Rose's other business partner, while the red-haired aide confirms the man's high professional standing. The aide describes a prestigious elite from a baron family who turned down the imperial palace. Keeping the man's elderly age to himself, the aide watches Artyom's jealousy flare over this mysterious talent. Artyom clenches his hand, unable to tolerate the thought of another man getting close to Rose. Gwen is stunned by Rose's ambitious plan, his hands trembling on the table in disbelief. A sudden, sharp shush sounding as Rose signals for Gwen to lower his voice in the public setting. Gwen admits he doubted her letter's claim about seeking cooperation from the princess for her business. Rose explains that staying ahead of market trends is their greatest advantage over slower competitors. Glad that everything is progressing smoothly, Rose suggests they begin refining the specific details of their product. A sudden, paper rustles sounding as Rose reveals a map, ready to finalize the most crucial stage. As they discuss a site for the department store, an eye-patched man watches them from a distance. The mysterious eye-patched man observes their conversation, noting their plans to enter the department store business. He recalls how the reputable Gwen previously refused a partnership offer from the influential Lord Cedric. Watching Rose, he resolves to report her partnership with Gwen to Lord Cedric as quickly as possible. Rose rejects Gwen's suggestion for land, demanding a massive plot of 25,000 pyong instead. She envisions a cultural landmark where customers stay longer, necessitating a much larger plot of land. A sudden paper flip sounding as Gwen presents the building's structural blueprints for Rose to review. Rose details her modern vision, including stone underground stables and a vertical ventilation system for fresh air. Gwen understands her innovative concepts but remains deeply concerned about the practical limitations of her request. Sensing his hesitation, Rose stops to listen to Gwen's expert opinion on her ambitious construction plans. Gwen points out the impossible reality that no such large plot of land exists within the capital. He warns that large-scale excavation would be difficult and meet heavy public opposition from the local workers. Rose shocks Gwen by suggesting they abandon the capital and build their department store elsewhere. A sudden chair scrape sounding as Rose stands up, energized by her bold new strategy. She radiates confidence, her mind fully committed to the unconventional path she has just chosen. Standing together, Gwen is bewildered to realize Rose has set her sights on the Artyom territory. The grand, multi-tiered spires of the Artyom territory tower over the landscape under a bright sky. Rose explains that focusing solely on the capital limits their profit margins and growth potential. Gwen is flustered as Rose highlights the risk of becoming too dependent on the capital's fickle nobility. A sudden, soft laugh sounding as Rose smiles, confident that her vision extends far beyond the capital. Gwen listens intently as Rose argues that they need a broader customer base than just local elites. Rose highlights the Artyom territory's geographic advantage as a strategic hub for international trade and commerce. She envisions attracting foreign nobles as customers, expanding their market far beyond the kingdom's borders. Rose describes how the territory has transitioned from a literal battlefield into a peaceful and thriving hub. Gwen realizes that lower maintenance fees and a broader audience make her plan overwhelmingly superior. He confesses his mistake in thinking she was fragile, acknowledging her sharp and formidable business mind. Gwen asks about the unusually soft soil quality, checking if she has accounted for construction challenges. Realizing she was prepared for every question, Gwen finally agrees to follow her lead on the project. Rose brightly invites Gwen to explore the territory with her, eager to begin their new venture. Gwen nods with a respectful smile, fully convinced by Rose's meticulous and visionary business strategy. Walking through the dark cobblestone streets, Gwen carries his bag as he heads home for the night. He celebrates securing the territory at a cheap price, unaware of the figure waiting in the shadows. The eye-patched man sits silently on a bench, his presence startling Gwen as he passes by. Gwen stops to buy flowers, feeling lucky to find a shop still open at such a late hour. A sudden paper rustle sounding as the eye-patched man confronts Gwen about the recipient of the flowers. Gwen walks cheerfully through the evening streets, thinking of his wife and the wonderful day he had. A sudden ambush cuts his joy short as a gloved hand clamps over his mouth, stifling his cries. The bouquet falls as the red-haired aide looms behind Gwen, completing the silent capture in the dark shadows. Gwen wakes up bound and gagged in a dimly lit room, his eyes wide with terror as light enters. Lord Cedric stands before his captive, his expression cold as he asks if the elderly man is finally awake. Looming over Gwen, Lord Cedric displays a chilling lack of empathy, while roses frame his intimidating, high-born presence. Cedric sits casually amidst torture devices, mentioning they still have several things to discuss in this grim place. He scolds Gwen for betraying him just to sell luxury goods, insisting the man is capable of much more. Cedric offers a second chance, urging Gwen to return to House DeWens and abandon his new business partner. Examining a document, Cedric tells Gwen to let go of any lingering attachments to his current visionary project. A sudden, loud bang sounding as the heavy door is slammed shut, leaving the captive man's fate uncertain. Cedric stands over Gwen's beaten form, remorselessly acknowledging their 30-year history before ordering him to be taken home. The red-haired aide bows respectfully as Cedric commands him to return the broken Gwen to his residence. Gwen's wife waits outside with a lantern, her heart sinking as she worries about her husband's unusual delay. A sudden, sharp shatter sounding as the lantern hits the ground upon seeing her husband's wounded, trembling state. She rushes to her husband, horrified by his injuries and the funeral-style flowers he was forced to carry. Inside, the grim significance of the black roses and white baby's breath dawns on them as a funeral omen. Slumped at the table, Gwen despairs over his predicament, unsure how to proceed against Lord Cedric's overwhelming influence. He clutches his hands tightly, terrified that Cedric will eliminate his entire family for his perceived betrayal. His wife watches in concern as Gwen agonizes over how to protect her and their son from danger. A sudden, heavy step sounding as a cloaked man enters the room, startling the vulnerable couple. Gwen recognizes the newcomer as Frederick, questioning the man's unexpected presence during this moment of absolute crisis. A sudden, steady footfall sounding as Cernay steps forward, declaring he has arrived because his help is needed. A blonde maid struggles to lead Finn, the golden retriever, encouraging the tired dog to walk a bit further. She stops abruptly, realizing she has arrived too early and hoping she isn't spotted by the wrong person. Artyom stands with his arms crossed, his presence striking as he waits outside the mansion in the soft light. A sudden, quiet ahem sounding as the blonde maid asks why he is out, and Artyom notes her lateness. She looks at him suspiciously as the Grand Duke claims he was merely taking a walk in the evening. Finn lies flat on the ground, his tongue hanging out as he clearly protests the long, exhausting walk. The maid reports her success in signing the department store contract specifically within the Grand Duke's own territory. Artyom is visibly shocked by her decision to bypass the capital, questioning her reasoning for such a bold move. Radiating warmth, the blonde maid confesses her simple desire to be of help to the Grand Duke. Noticing the exhaustion of both the maid and Finn, Artyom kindly suggests they head inside for some rest. A sudden, warm flush sounding as Rose's cheeks redden when Artyom calls her his greatest business partner. Rose revels in the high praise, celebrating the title of greatest partner with exuberant, joyful energy. While she celebrates, the red-haired aide stands in the background, watching her with a silent, judgmental gaze. The aide's internal voice mocks her pride, cruelly labeling her a parasite for relying so heavily on others. A sudden, quick turn sounding as Rose whips around to face the hallway, sensing someone is watching her. Catching a glimpse of the red-haired man retreating, Rose wonders if the familiar figure she saw was actually Naran. The scene shifts to Rose sitting at a table, her expression troubled and distracted during a tea meeting. Artyom explains his plan to intercept the assassination attempt on the princess by switching the poisoned cups. He details the banquet plot using intel from an anonymous letter that allowed them to prepare for the conspirators. Rose looks up in surprise as Artyom reveals his intention to launch a bold counterattack against their enemies. Artyom smiles confidently while discussing the strategic advantage they now hold over their rival schemes. They continue their discussion, though Rose's tiny chibi form expresses the true depth of her worry and stress. A sudden, light cough sounding as Artyom shifts the conversation, noticing Rose's lingering distraction. He notes how busy she has been lately and asks if she has taken on a new partner. His jealousy flares as he insists she doesn't need more assistance, his expression shifting into one of possessiveness. Rose nervously confirms the new partnership while secretly resolving to hide Gwen's identity to avoid a misunderstanding. A sudden, soft movement sounding as Artyom leans in close, demanding that Rose introduce him to this mysterious person. Artyom leans in close to Rose, reminding her that he is her co-investor. A sudden, warm flush sounding as Rose's face reddens while she stares deeply into Artyom's intense blue eyes. Finn the golden retriever barks excitedly, rushing across the stone path toward the startled business partners. A sudden, loud clatter sounding as the energetic dog topples a garden table and chair during his approach. Rose is knocked to the ground, desperately hugging the oversized dog while attempting to calm his chaotic energy. Rose takes a deep breath, thankful that Finn's interruption prevented her from falling further under Artyom's intense spell. Artyom watches the scene with a confused expression, noting that Rose seems unable to control Finn today. Rose laughs as Finn licks her face, making Artyom wonder if her earlier distress was just his imagination. A magnificent white carriage pulled by a pair of white horses travels through a lush, green-walled path. Inside the carriage, Artyom looks out the window, contemplating the high stakes of the upcoming princess's banquet. Rose sits silently in her elegant banquet gown, reflecting on the lack of supernatural incidents since that day. Artyom observes her carefully, struggling to understand why he is suddenly so aware of her presence and beauty. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Artyom is alerted that they have nearly reached the banquet's grand entrance. Rose stands in her intricate dress, looking like a vision of high-born grace surrounded by white roses. A sudden, light cough sounding as Artyom clears his throat before gallantly offering his hand to Rose. He invites her into the hall, acknowledging the importance of the event she has been eagerly anticipating. Rose voices her fears of failing, but Artyom takes her hand, promising that he is with her. He encourages her to face her highness with pride, wanting her to abandon her lingering social anxieties. Artyom smiles warmly, reminding Rose that they will present themselves as a pair of confident business partners. They enter the opulent ballroom, immediately becoming the center of attention as nobles whisper and watch from afar. A sudden, curious murmur sounding as a noblewoman in blue notices their arrival with a shocked expression. The guests realize Rose has returned, noting her arrival alongside the Grand Duke is no longer a coincidence. Gossiping voices ripple through the hall, recalling her previous appearance at the Wen's wedding as a strategic move. Rose remains composed despite the stares, finding the atmosphere far less chaotic than her initial social return. Artyom prepares to step away to greet Diana, ensuring Rose feels comfortable being left alone for a moment. Rose playfully teases him for leaving her so quickly, maintaining a cheerful facade despite the daunting social environment. A sudden, soft gasp sounding as Artyom bows deeply and kisses Rose's hand, leaving her stunned and blushing. A sudden, high-pitched giggle sounding as onlookers remark on the passionate and bold display between the two partners. Rose closes her eyes, feeling the heat in her cheeks as the crowd's intense scrutiny begins to overwhelm her. Nearby nobles mock her status, insisting she is merely Miss Rose now that her divorce is common knowledge. A sudden, sharp realization sounding as the black-haired Eric overhears the mention of Rose's name. Eric stares in disbelief, his expression turning cold and stunned as he learns of his ex-wife's presence. A sudden, heavy step sounding as Eric walks toward Rose, his back to the viewer as he approaches. A sudden, loud slap sounding as Eric grabs Rose's arm with an aggressive and demanding tone. A sudden, sharp crack sounding as a hand forcefully blocks Eric's reach, preventing him from touching Rose further. Rose stands her ground, reminding Eric that they are strangers now, while he continues his delusional accusations. A sudden, shocked gasp sounding as guests listen to Eric's possessive claim that Rose is still his woman. A red-haired noblewoman and her companion watch with clear disdain, labeling Eric a lunatic and an absolute idiot. Rose looks at Eric with pure contempt, disgusted by his complete lack of respect for her as a person. A sudden, tense pause sounding as Eric stares back at Rose, refusing to accept the reality of their separation. Rose firmly rejects him, declaring her lack of feelings and revealing she already has someone she cares about. A sudden, quick glance sounding as Rose looks away, prompting a jealous Eric to demand the man's identity. Artyom charges back into the scene, appearing worried as he reaches out to ensure Rose is unharmed. Looking at Eric and her past life, Rose vows never to suffer because of such men ever again. The scene shifts as the name of the Grand Duke is announced amidst a flurry of blooming roses. Rose holds Artyom's arm, presenting him to Eric and the crowd as the man she truly loves. Eric stands frozen in humiliation, his face flushing as he is forced to accept the truth of her words. The noble guests gossip maliciously, claiming Rose's success comes from her talent for sweet-talking powerful men. A sudden, rhythmic click sounding as a golden-haired woman's heels signal her arrival to silence the rumors. Princess Diana appears with a bright smile, calling Rose's bold behavior confident and admirable rather than scandalous. The gray-haired man and brown-haired woman observe the unfolding events, acknowledging that such honesty requires immense courage. Artyom apologizes for the chaos as Princess Diana warmly greets Rose, mentioning she has heard much from her brother. Princess Diana suggests they discuss Rose's intriguing plan later at their leisure, while they share a private, knowing look. Rose smiles brightly, feeling immense relief that her interaction with the Grand Duke and the princess proceeded so smoothly. Eric's parents argue amidst the crowd, with his mother furious over his humiliation, while his father demands she remain silent. The black-haired man watches Rose with disdain, frustrated by the mess created by her inability to read the room. As Princess Diana accepts a glass, the black-haired man maliciously resolves that her perceived insolence will end this very day. The conspirators' plan is revealed as poisoned wine is poured, intended to eliminate both the princess and Artyom together. Artyom and Rose stand together as confident business partners, raising their glasses to lead the guests in a celebratory toast. Diana drinks the wine while the black-haired man watches intensely, internally urging her to finish the lethal draft. A sudden, sharp crack sounding as Artyom's glass shatters and he collapses, leaving Rose and the guests in absolute shock. A sudden, heavy thud sounding as Artyom falls to the floor, blood pooling from his mouth as onlookers scream in terror. Rose desperately cradles the fallen Artyom, begging him to wake up while questioning why their prepared plan has gone awry. A sudden, rhythmic click sounding as Princess Diana watches in horror, witnessing Artyom's struggle for life as blood stains his uniform. Diana is overcome by fear, a sudden, heavy thud sounding in her heart as she vows not to lose family again. The princess wobbles, gasping as she reflects on past tragedies and refuses to let history repeat itself in this moment. Chaos erupts in the ballroom as guests cry out that Princess Diana has also collapsed, shocking the king on his throne. Princess Diana lies motionless on the floor, her elegant gown spread out as the banquet descends into a silent, terrifying nightmare. A sudden, quiet tch sounding as the blonde, bearded king watches the scene with a cold, judgmental expression from his throne. An urgent command rings out through the hall, demanding that the banquet be stopped immediately following the horrific double collapse. Guards violently apprehend the waiter, demanding to know if he is responsible for the poisoning as he is forced down. The king interrogates the staff while the maid pleads for her life, desperately claiming she is innocent of any wrongdoing. The king reveals the incriminating evidence, holding up a small poison bottle that was discovered hidden within the maid's pocket. A sudden, cold shiver sounding as the maid realizes she is trapped, her terrified expression reflecting the hopelessness of her situation. A sudden, heavy thud sounding as the maid collapses, confessing she only followed orders to hand the glass to Diana. The king listens to her desperate plea for mercy, his face partially shrouded in shadow as he considers her confession. The male conspirator commits suicide by biting his tongue, leaving a trail of blood as he refuses to betray his masters. A sudden, rhythmic click sounding as the king approaches the maid, offering her a chance at survival through a bargain. He promises her immunity and a generous reward if she reveals the identity of the person truly behind the assassination plot. The maid looks up with a twisted, tearful smile, questioning if the king's promise of mercy is truly a sincere offer. A sudden, sharp slice sounding as the maid lunges at the king, resulting in a chaotic and bloody struggle for control. A sudden, loud clatter sounding as the bloody sword falls, and the king commands his guards to take the woman away. The king wipes blood from his hand, learning from a guard that Diana collapsed from shock rather than actual poisoning. He is visibly stunned by the revelation, struggling to comprehend how the lethal poison failed to reach its intended royal target. The king realizes their plan was leaked, concluding that Artyom intentionally drank the poison, knowing he possessed a natural resistance. Regret fills the king as he looks at his blood-stained glove, lamenting his decision to listen to Duke Felicie's advice. Memories of past deaths and the decision to spare a young Artyom haunt the king as he reflects on his mistakes. He orders a report the moment Artyom awakens, resentful that the child he once spared has grown to obstruct him. A sudden, low creak sounding as the king departs, resolving that he must meet with Duke Felice to discuss their failure. The king's expression turns murderous as he declares they must immediately devise new countermeasures against Artyom and his allies.